Under the low hum of radar equipment, the frozen Arctic night presses against the walls, and instruments begin recording echoes that do not match any known aircraft. Follow the pilot in Kentucky as he climbs toward a mysterious glimmer, and lean in with a bomber crew over the North Sea as voices crackle through static, impossible to trace. Across isolated airstrips and silent skies, every signal, every flicker of light, and every interrupted transmission is documented in meticulous logs. Step into these moments preserved in declassified Air Force transcripts and witness the strange, unresolvable events that challenged perception and left an enduring mystery across the skies. The Mantel Intercept, Kentucky, 1948. The afternoon of January 7th, 1948, unfolded routinely over central Kentucky until reports began filtering into Godman Army Airfield of something unfamiliar hanging high above the base. Soldiers, airmen, and civilian employees paused their work to observe a pale object that appeared metallic and steady, neither drifting like a cloud nor moving like a conventional aircraft. Declassified Air Force transcripts later recorded how control tower personnel struggled to classify the sighting using standard aviation references and known flight profiles. It was within this atmosphere of measured uncertainty that Captain Thomas F. Mantel Jr. would soon be ordered toward an object no one present could confidently explain or identify. Ground observers described the object as large and reflective, visible for well over an hour, and seemingly unaffected by prevailing winds at multiple altitudes. Some accounts compared its appearance to polished metal catching sunlight, though it lacked the flashing navigation markers expected of military or civilian aircraft operating in controlled airspace. Control tower logs show repeated checks for scheduled flights, weather balloons, and experimental tests, all returning negative or inconclusive. The object's persistence distinguished it from fleeting sightings and optical illusions, prompting officers at Godman to treat it as a legitimate airspace concern rather than a momentary visual anomaly. At the time, 4 F-51D Mustang fighters from the Kentucky Air National Guard were airborne nearby on a routine training mission. These aircraft, propeller-driven and rugged, were well understood by their pilots, but they lacked pressurized cockpits and carried oxygen systems designed for limited high-altitude exposure. Tower controllers redirected the flight to investigate, issuing instructions that reflected standard intercept protocol rather than alarm or urgency. Mantel acknowledged the order calmly, and the group adjusted course, climbing steadily toward the object reported above Fort Knox without any indication that the situation was considered extraordinary. As the Mustangs gained altitude, radio communications captured a growing sense of spatial imbalance between the pilots and the unknown object. The pilots consistently reported that the object remained above them, forcing a prolonged climb to maintain visual contact despite increasing altitude and thinning air. One pilot later stated that the object did not behave like any aircraft he had encountered, as it neither approached nor retreated but seemed to hold position relative to their movement. Despite this, the tone of the transmissions remained controlled, professional, and notably free of speculation or emotional response. Fuel and oxygen limitations soon began to narrow the pursuit in practical terms. One by one, 3 of the 4 pilots broke off the intercept, citing operational constraints rather than concern or fear. Mantel, however, continued upward, stating that he believed he could close the distance if the climb continued. Declassified summaries indicate that this decision was neither reckless nor discouraged by controllers, who were monitoring multiple variables and lacked precise real-time data on cockpit oxygen levels. With the others turning back, Mantel's aircraft became the sole link between ground observers and the unidentified object. At approximately 22,000 feet, Mantel reported clearer visual impressions as the distance appeared to narrow slightly. He described the object as metallic and of considerable size, estimating it as larger than his Mustang and appearing solid rather than diffuse. The object reflected light consistently rather than emitting it, suggesting a defined surface rather than a luminous phenomenon. These details, preserved in official transcripts, would later complicate attempts to attribute the sighting to weather balloons or atmospheric reflections. Controllers acknowledged his report and requested continued updates as long as conditions allowed safe flight. As the climb continued beyond 25,000 feet, Mantel's radio transmissions became shorter and less frequent, though not disoriented or incoherent. He made no distress calls and did not indicate equipment malfunction or physical discomfort. Ground witnesses continued watching the object, some noting that it seemed to ascend gradually, maintaining separation from the pursuing aircraft without abrupt changes in speed or direction. Radar coverage in the region was limited at the time, offering no independent confirmation of the object's altitude or trajectory, and leaving voice communication as the primary source of situational awareness. The final transmission from Mantel was routine and unremarkable, noting that he was still climbing and attempting to close in. Moments later, communication ceased entirely without warning or emergency signal. Witnesses on the ground lost sight of the object around the same time, though whether it ascended beyond visibility, drifted away, or blended into the sky remains unclear. Shortly afterward, Mantel's aircraft entered a steep downward spiral, ultimately breaking apart upon impact near Franklin, Kentucky, leaving little ambiguity about the fatal outcome. The official crash investigation concluded that Mantel had likely lost consciousness due to hypoxia, a known risk at high altitude without sufficient oxygen supply. The physical evidence recovered from the wreckage supported this assessment, and no mechanical failure was identified within the aircraft itself. Yet the investigation deliberately separated the cause of the crash from the reason for the climb. Air Force documents repeatedly emphasized that while hypoxia explained Mantel's loss of control, it did not explain the presence or behavior of the object that initiated the intercept. In the weeks following the incident, Air Force analysts explored alternative explanations, including the possibility of a classified skyhook high-altitude balloon. However, declassified records reveal uncertainty even within internal reviews, as no confirmed launch data matched the timing, altitude estimates, or visual descriptions reported by both air and ground observers. The object's extended visibility, apparent size, and steady altitude challenged simple categorization. Rather than forcing a conclusion, investigators allowed the case to remain partially unresolved within official files. Internal correspondence generated after the Mantel incident reveals a notable shift in how similar reports were handled by Air Force commands. Declassified memoranda show that flight safety officers began circulating reminders about altitude limits and oxygen discipline when intercepting unidentified objects, an unusual move given the absence of a confirmed threat. At the same time, intelligence summaries cautioned against dismissing persistent aerial observations too quickly, noting that the Mantel case involved corroborated ground witnesses and trained pilots. The documents stop short of assigning cause, but their careful wording suggests institutional unease rather than closure. What makes the Mantel intercept endure is not dramatic language or sensational testimony, but the disciplined restraint evident throughout the transcripts and reports. A trained military pilot followed orders, reported what he saw without embellishment, and continued a pursuit that seemed justified within the information available at the time. The record ends not with confusion or panic, but with absence. That silence, preserved in declassified pages, leaves the initiating presence suspended between documented observation and unanswered origin. Captain Mantel climbed towards something that afternoon because protocol demanded it, and whatever occupied that space above Kentucky disappeared without ever being formally identified. Voices over the North Sea, RAF Bomber Command 1942. Night operations over the North Sea demanded an attention to sound that daylight flying rarely required, as crews learned to trust voices crackling through headsets more than the empty darkness beyond the canopy. In 1942, RAF Bomber Command aircraft crossed long stretches of black water, where cloud, sea and sky merged into a single unlit mass, leaving radio traffic as the only reliable confirmation that others shared the airspace. Declassified transcripts from this period capture a routine flow of acknowledgements and course checks, punctuated by long stretches of silence. Within those records appears a brief, unsettling exchange, an aircraft crew experience defined not by what was seen, but by what was heard and answered in the void. During 1942, RAF Bomber Command enforced strict radio discipline, reducing speech to codes and confirmations designed to leave no room for misunderstanding in hostile airspace. Wireless operators were trained to keep transmissions short, standardized, and infrequent, partly to avoid interception, and partly to maintain order among dozens of aircraft operating simultaneously. Call signs, timing and phrasing followed established patterns that crews internalized through repetition. Any deviation from this structure stood out immediately, not because it sounded dramatic, but because it violated a system built to tolerate nothing unnecessary, especially during long overwater flights where mistakes were rarely survivable. Midway through one such routine transmission, a voice entered the frequency that did not request identification, yet responded as though it already knew exactly who was listening. According to declassified summaries, the reply matched the timing and tone expected of an authorized aircraft, offering confirmations without prompting and using correct procedural language. There was no distortion suggesting distant interference, nor the clipped irregularity associated with atmospheric noise. The voice arrived cleanly, answered precisely, and then paused, as if waiting for the next instruction in a sequence it already understood. Inside the cockpit, the wireless operator and navigator exchanged glances without speaking, both recognizing that the cadence of the transmission followed procedure too precisely to be dismissed as interference. They did not react with alarm, nor did they break protocol by addressing the anomaly directly. Instead, the crew continued as trained, maintaining course and altitude while noting the irregular exchange. In debriefings later summarized in Air Ministry files, crew members emphasized that nothing about the voice suggested confusion or improvisation, which made its presence more troubling than if it had been garbled or erratic. Attempts to verify the source unfolded methodically, with authentication challenges issued and acknowledged in forms that should not have been possible without an assigned call sign. The responses returned promptly, structured correctly, and aligned with the established communication rhythm of bomber command operations. Yet no identifying information was ever volunteered, and none could be coaxed without breaking radio discipline. The exchange occupied only a short span of time, but its technical accuracy placed it outside the category of accidental crosstalk or enemy intrusion, as understood by crews familiar with both. Below the aircraft, the North Sea offered no visual reference that could anchor the sound to a shape or movement, leaving the crew suspended between water and static. There were no lights, flares or silhouettes to suggest another aircraft nearby, and navigation instruments showed no deviation that might indicate close formation flying. The sea absorbed sound and reflected nothing, reinforcing the isolation common to wartime patrols. In that emptiness, the voice remained unconnected to any observable presence, existing only within the narrow band of radio frequency shared by the crew. When post-flight transcripts were reviewed, ground stations reported no record of the anomalous replies, despite their clarity and apparent technical correctness. Monitoring logs from coastal facilities showed routine traffic but no originating transmission, matching the responses described by the crew. This absence complicated efforts to trace the source, as it suggested the voice did not pass through known relay points. Analysts noted the discrepancy without elaboration, preserving the contradiction between what was heard in the air and what was recorded on the ground. Separate from flight debriefs, RAF signals units routinely examined unexplained transmissions for technical signatures, including signal strength consistency, modulation clarity, and frequency stability. Declassified wartime guidance shows that such characteristics were often used to distinguish atmospheric effects from deliberate broadcasts. In this case, analysts noted that the voice transmissions maintained uniform signal quality despite changing aircraft position, an unusual feature over the open sea where distance typically altered reception. The observation was logged without speculation, yet its inclusion suggests the anomaly extended beyond human perception into measurable communication behaviour. Although German jamming operations were well documented by this stage of the war, intelligence officers noted that the transmissions lacked distortion, delay or intent to deceive. Enemy radio interference typically sought to confuse navigation or overload frequencies, often revealing itself through repetition or crude mimicry. In this case, the voice neither misdirected nor distracted, offering only technically correct acknowledgements before falling silent. The behaviour did not align with known jamming tactics, a distinction quietly emphasised in internal assessments without assigning an alternative explanation. The language used in official summaries remained deliberately restrained, describing the event as an unattributed transmission rather than an encounter or incident. Reports avoided speculative terms and focused instead on the procedural anomaly, documenting what occurred without interpretation. This approach mirrored the broader wartime practice of limiting conjecture in official records, especially when no operational consequence followed. Yet the careful wording also preserved the mystery, ensuring the experience was neither dismissed nor explained away within the surviving documentation. No subsequent missions reported a similar intrusion, and the crew was never explained the assurance that their experience had been formally logged. The flight continued as planned, and operational demands quickly shifted attention elsewhere. In the compressed pace of wartime operations, unresolved anomalies often receded into filing systems rather than debate. Still, the singular nature of the transmission ensured it remained distinct within the archive, noted precisely because it did not fit any known category of wartime radio behaviour. What remained in the record was not an object or a trajectory, but a sequence of voices that appeared briefly in wartime airspace and then receded without a trace. Unlike visual sightings that could be debated as misidentification, the audio exchange existed in transcripts and memory alone. It left no physical evidence, no radar return, and no confirmed origin, only a documented interruption in a system designed to be orderly. That interruption endured as a quiet irregularity within the vast methodical machinery of bomber command operations. Those voices crossed a controlled military channel in the middle of the war, answered every question they were asked, and left behind no origin anyone could point to. The Gorman dogfight, Fargo, 1948. Twilight settled over Fargo as Captain George Gorman's P-51 Mustang traced familiar patrol patterns. The horizon glowed with the fading orange of a sun that had already vanished behind low clouds, when a glinting, fast-moving shape suddenly drew his attention and initiated an encounter later recorded as one of 1948's most perplexing aerial engagements. The quiet of early evening seemed absolute at first, broken only by the hum of the Mustang's engine, yet the sudden reflection of something else in the distance hinted at movement beyond the predictable. Gorman adjusted his goggles and focused on the narrowing horizon, trying to identify the anomaly without alarming his crew or compromising situational awareness. Routine flight procedures kept the Mustang steady at 5,000 feet, instruments aligned, and throttle responses calibrated. Yet every maneuver that evening was shadowed by awareness that something in the sky behaved with a precision and speed unlike any aircraft Gorman had previously encountered. He noted in his transcript that the object did not follow conventional flight paths, holding an altitude and heading that fluctuated almost imperceptibly, but always in a manner that maintained visibility against fading light. Despite careful attention to the altimeter, airspeed indicator and compass, the object seemed untethered to typical aerodynamic limits, challenging both the pilot's training and the technical parameters of his aircraft. It was shortly after turning a gentle arc northward that Gorman first saw the object clearly. A small, metallic form was silhouetted against the dimming sky, moving with abrupt acceleration and deceleration that no propeller-driven plane of the era could replicate. He observed it from various angles, noting that it neither banked nor rolled in the way conventional aircraft did, yet its trajectory remained coherent and continuous. Ground visibility would have been limited at that hour, but Gorman's proximity allowed a detailed observation. The object's surface reflected the last rays of sunlight, creating a glint that made tracking easier, yet impossible to classify among known aircraft designs. Immediately he adjusted course, attempting to approach, climb, and close the distance. The unusual responsiveness of the object, subtly altering direction with every maneuver, challenged both the physics of his Mustang and the limits of human perception. Gorman described in his post-flight report how he anticipated or responded to his turns, a phenomenon that blurred the line between mechanical motion and apparent intelligence. He maintained strict control of the aircraft, relying on instincts honed by countless training missions, yet the object's unpredictability forced him into rapid adjustments, each requiring precise calculation of speed, angle, and energy management to prevent overshooting or losing sight entirely. The object executed sudden lateral shifts and stops mid-air. These movements, logged in his notes and the declassified transcript, appeared almost intelligent yet remained within visual range, forcing Gorman to rely entirely on instinct, instrument reading, and unbroken observation. Each time he attempted to anticipate its path, it altered its vector just enough to evade precise alignment. He noted the absence of contrails, no discernible exhaust, and no sound, despite the Mustang's relatively loud engine. This silent, agile presence combined with rapid movement created a dissonance between expectation and observation, reinforcing the impression of an encounter outside known aviation norms, yet entirely real and verifiable in the transcript records. At one point, the unknown craft drew close enough to produce a noticeable glare on the canopy. Gorman shielded his eyes while maintaining control, a proximity unprecedented in prior sightings, heightening both the immediacy of the engagement and the precision recorded in official logs. He documented that the object seemed to linger briefly at a relative position before darting off in another direction. The combination of speed, maneuvering, and sudden proximity tested the Mustang's aerodynamic limits and the pilot's reaction time simultaneously. Every second required split judgment calls, yet the anomaly remained elusive, impossible to classify, and entirely devoid of any familiar mechanical signature or sound. Meanwhile, radar and ground-based observation posts reported no corroborating tracks. Gorman's testimony became the primary source, a discrepancy that analysts later noted as unusual for a fully visible high-speed object eluding the detection technology of 1948. Declassified notes from nearby facilities highlighted that no aircraft, friendly or enemy, were operating in that sector at the reported time. The object's visibility contrasted sharply with its absence in tracking systems. This dissonance was emphasized in official summaries as both a limitation of available instruments and an unexplained anomaly. Analysts recorded the event carefully, acknowledging the pilot's skill while noting that conventional explanations could not account for the observed behavior. Despite repeated attempts, Gorman could not match its speed or maneuverability. The object responded with instantaneous changes in direction and velocity, behavior inconsistent with any jet or propeller aircraft known to the Air Force. Each pursuit attempt required maximum engine output and precise aileron adjustments, yet the object would pull away without apparent effort. Logs show repeated reference to its stop-and-go motion, rapid acceleration, and sudden shifts in course. Gorman's careful notation of these details, combined with instrument readings, created a record that was both technically detailed and narratively unsettling, preserving the impression of a high-speed entity operating beyond conventional understanding. His post-flight descriptions referenced metallic reflection, unpredictable but purposeful movement, and the sense of being watched. All of these details were carefully transcribed in official documentation, preserving the mystery while maintaining factual integrity. Gorman emphasized that the encounter was not a hallucination or optical illusion, as it was observed across multiple maneuvers and under consistent visual conditions. Every flight adjustment he made was logged alongside observed changes in the object's position, providing a procedural backbone to the otherwise inexplicable series of events. Analysts later highlighted the precision of these observations as exceptional, reinforcing the anomaly's credibility. After several minutes of pursuit, the object abruptly accelerated toward the northern horizon. It vanished without a sonic boom, contrail, or other physical trace, leaving the pilot alone over familiar airspace with only his detailed observations. Gorman returned to base, maintaining a steady heading and speed, careful not to introduce errors into the official flight log. Ground controllers noted his report upon landing, emphasizing that the departure of the object was sudden yet fully captured in pilot notes. The immediate disappearance reinforced the mystery, leaving no physical evidence behind and ensuring that the encounter would remain unresolved despite meticulous documentation. Returned to base, Gorman completed the official sighting report. The declassified files emphasized precise chronology, altitude, and maneuvers without assigning origin, highlighting both the pilot's skill and the enduring mystery of the object's impossible performance. Debriefing summaries preserved every vector, speed estimate, and reflection observed on the metallic surface, yet analysts concluded only that no known aircraft could replicate the behavior. The documentation underscored the object's anomalous performance while adhering strictly to factual observation, creating a record both thorough and enigmatic, and reinforcing the sense of an unexplained aerial phenomenon hovering on the edge of aviation understanding. Investigators later revisited the case within the context of other 1948 Air Force reports. Comparative analysis confirmed that while the Gorman dogfight shared traits with other high-speed sightings, its detailed pilot logs, proximity, and precise tracking made it singular in terms of verifiable documentation. Analysts emphasized the rarity of such encounters occurring over controlled airspace with a fully trained and responsive pilot. The files preserve the encounter as both extraordinary and factual, leaving future investigators with questions regarding its origin, propulsion, and intent, yet providing no answers beyond the meticulous records of one determined pilot. It vanished into the twilight as suddenly as it appeared, leaving only the detailed pilot logs and an unanswerable question suspended in the North Dakota sky. The Tehran interference, Iran, 1976. Above the arid expanse near Tehran, Flight 31 cruised steadily at 33,000 feet, autopilot engaged and instruments aligned for a routine segment of the evening journey. It was during this ordinary stretch that the first subtle anomalies began, appearing in the cockpit as flickering lights and brief, unexplained shifts in heading, meticulously recorded in the crew's declassified logs. The sky appeared calm with no indication of turbulence or weather events that might interfere with normal operation. The aircraft systems initially responded as expected, making the first irregularities all the more disquieting and worthy of detailed attention. The captain monitored standard navigational instruments, cross-checking compass, altimeter and airspeed indicators while maintaining steady throttle adjustments. Despite procedural familiarity, the crew noted minor irregularities, a series of small deviations inconsistent with wind or known turbulence, raising early questions about the source of interference in an otherwise routine flight corridor. Each movement was carefully noted, the autopilot occasionally responding in subtle ways that contradicted manual control inputs. Even slight heading shifts prompted immediate verification against redundant systems, with all observations documented to ensure that any unusual patterns would be captured in the post-flight debrief. Shortly afterward, the radio began emitting intermittent static punctuated by bursts of unintelligible signals. The co-pilot documented each occurrence in real time, observing that neither standard atmospheric interference nor known technical faults could explain the precise timing and clarity of the anomalies. These bursts repeated in a discernible pattern over several minutes, with intervals between transmissions too regular to attribute to chance. Crew logs recorded both the frequency and duration of each interference, noting that the clarity of the transmission suggested an external source, but one that left no trace on conventional radar or monitoring equipment, heightening the sense of unresolved mystery. Recognition of the pattern prompted the crew to cross-check all redundant systems, including secondary autopilot circuits, navigation panels, and auxiliary radio units. Each readout appeared normal on first glance, yet subtle discrepancies persisted, suggesting the interference was not random but targeted toward multiple onboard instruments simultaneously. Declassified Air Force transcripts emphasized the crew's careful procedural checks and methodical logging of anomalies, highlighting their disciplined approach. Even minor variations in heading, altitude, or speed were noted, illustrating both the precision of the observation and the unresolved nature of the phenomenon, which no onboard diagnostic could fully explain. As the flight progressed, the anomalies intensified, with sudden deviations in autopilot heading and transient instrument reversals demanding immediate corrective action. Crew members followed established protocol, alternating control inputs and cross-checking manual readings, documenting each instance meticulously. Even minor corrections caused simultaneous flickers or temporary errors in secondary instruments. The logs describe the crew's decision-making under pressure, their repeated efforts to isolate the source of the interference, and the procedural insistence on maintaining altitude and heading despite the unusual conditions. The episode persisted long enough to create a detailed record of both system irregularities and crew response. Meanwhile, ground-based radar and Tehran air traffic control monitored the flight without detecting unusual activity. Transcripts from the region later noted that the aircraft's observed position sometimes diverged slightly from log telemetry, reinforcing a dissonance between onboard perception and external observation. Analysts highlighted that no other aircraft or known phenomena could account for the anomalies, leaving the incident formally unresolved in official records. Logs indicate that controllers observed the flight as routine, unaware of the repeated subtle deviations experienced by the crew. This divergence between human observation and technological detection added a layer of documented complexity to the event. The crew began reporting mild vertigo, and cognitive strain as they compensated for repeated instrument inconsistencies. Pilot logs captured terse but detailed descriptions of the effects, highlighting the physiological challenge posed by simultaneous monitoring of rapidly changing indicators and strict adherence to flight protocols under unexplained interference. Crew members alternated monitoring responsibilities and cross-checked every instrument reading, noting that despite mental fatigue, the aircraft remained stable and within the intended flight path. The incident underscores the intersection of human perception, high-altitude physiology, and anomalous technological behavior, all recorded with precision in declassified Air Force and FAA documentation. Efforts to stabilize the aircraft included switching instrument feeds, re-engaging the autopilot, and manually cross-checking navigation systems. While partial control returned intermittently, the anomalies persisted unpredictably, compelling the crew to maintain heightened situational awareness and precise logging. Declassified records emphasized the crew's systematic responses, noting that no corrective measure eliminated the interference. Every procedural adjustment was documented, providing a clear chronology for investigators. These meticulous logs ensured that the event could be studied objectively, even though the underlying cause remained unresolved, leaving the crew's experience as both scientifically precise and intrinsically mysterious. Brief moments of normal operation offered the crew the chance to resume standard course adjustments. These intervals, carefully noted in the logs, were short-lived. Any return to equilibrium was immediately followed by renewed instrument irregularities. The repeated fluctuations, combined with the unpredictability of timing and duration, reinforced the impression that the interference was neither environmental nor attributable to ordinary mechanical failure. Crew observations recorded in official transcripts highlight the sense of cautious anticipation, the reliance on procedural precision, and the lingering unease inherent in encountering a phenomenon that repeatedly defied standard expectations. Eventually, the anomalies ceased as abruptly as they had begun, leaving all systems reporting normally once more. The crew completed their flight, documenting every anomaly with precision, while analysts later noted the absence of visual cues, physical evidence, or corroborating radar signals. Official records preserve a timeline of events, capturing the repeated inconsistencies in heading, autopilot adjustments, and radio interference without proposing an explanation. The incident remains striking in its clarity of documentation and its simultaneous lack of resolution, emphasizing both the crew's professionalism and the enigmatic quality of the phenomenon they experienced. Official declassified reports framed the event in strict procedural language, outlining every logged deviation, autopilot adjustment, and crew response without assigning causality. Air Force and FAA files acknowledged the incident as unique within the historical record, emphasizing its persistence and the careful documentation that preserved the encounter while leaving its origin unexplained. Analysts reviewing the logs noted the precision of observations, the resilience of the crew, and the lack of external corroboration, highlighting the anomalous nature of the interference and its enduring status as a thoroughly documented, yet unsolved aviation mystery. The instruments returned to normal as silently as they had faltered, leaving only the crew's precise logs and a quiet unanswered question lingering over the Iranian sky. Radar echoes at Lakenheath, England, 1956. The radar operators at RAF Lakenheath tracked the quiet expanse of monitored airspace, their focus drawn to an unusual blip moving in a manner that did not match any recorded aircraft behaviour. Every detail was logged with procedural precision, the operators noting instantaneous changes in speed and heading that defied normal flight characteristics. The anomaly appeared and vanished intermittently, its presence confirmed across multiple screens. Transcripts emphasize that the crew maintained strict operational protocol while attempting to interpret the readings, conscious that any error could compromise the integrity of the observation during one of the most sensitive airspace monitoring operations in Cold War England. Every standard sweep of the radar screens revealed conventional flight paths and routine traffic, yet subtle discrepancies began to emerge. Altitudes fluctuated slightly, and speeds did not correlate with known aircraft performance data, prompting repeated verification across redundant systems. Operators communicated in clipped professional exchanges, cross-checking with secondary radar units and plotting anticipated flight corridors. The careful documentation in declassified logs highlights the anomaly's persistent presence and the crew's disciplined response. Even as the blip defied categorization, the operators maintained composure, emphasizing technical accuracy and procedural adherence, while slowly realizing that this was no ordinary radar echo. The first unexpected echo persisted, its size and trajectory inconsistent with planes or weather phenomena. Ground crews meticulously recorded each observation, marking it in multiple systems and correlating it with radar sweeps from nearby stations. Communications between operators conveyed both curiosity and caution, noting that the object accelerated, paused, and shifted direction in ways that suggested intelligent or unexplained control. The official transcripts preserve these exchanges in precise language, detailing every verification attempt. The anomaly's repeated appearance across separate radar feeds indicated a complex behavior pattern, one that no aircraft registry or meteorological model could explain, heightening the sense of mystery and operational urgency. Ground controllers initiated alerts to interceptor pilots, transmitting precise coordinates and movement vectors while maintaining procedural discipline. Declassified transcripts emphasize the clarity of communication, highlighting the operator's insistence on accurate relays despite the object's erratic behavior. Instructions included headings, altitudes, and speed adjustments, yet the anomaly consistently deviated from predicted positions. Operators continued monitoring multiple radar channels, cross-referencing the blip's behavior with routine traffic and environmental readings. Even as the intercept was authorized, uncertainty grew. No known aircraft could account for the blip's acceleration, vanishing periods, or apparent ability to remain undetected visually. Pilots engaged the radar coordinates, carefully adjusting headings and altitude to intercept the anomaly. Repeated attempts at visual identification yielded nothing outside the cockpit windows, leaving the crew reliant solely on instruments for situational awareness. Communications with ground control remained continuous, with precise updates transmitted at intervals recorded in the logs. Pilots reported that the blip's movements occasionally contradicted predicted flight paths, demonstrating a responsiveness beyond conventional aircraft capabilities. Transcripts note that every course correction was logged in real time, reflecting both the unusual behavior of the radar signature and the disciplined adherence to standard intercept procedures despite the extraordinary circumstances. The radar signature shifted abruptly, accelerating and decelerating in ways that far exceeded standard aircraft performance. At times, the blip appeared to split into multiple echoes, then reconverge, confusing both pilots and radar operators. Each irregularity was meticulously documented, with notes on heading changes, estimated speed, and altitude. Both the ground and airborne crews attempted to interpret the readings while maintaining operational safety, aware that any miscalculation could have severe consequences. Analysts reviewing the declassified files later emphasized the anomaly's unpredictability, noting that even experienced personnel could not reconcile the object's behavior with known aviation capabilities or environmental explanations. Air traffic coordinators and radar personnel quickly evaluated the operational implications, including the risk of restricted airspace violations and potential misidentification during Cold War surveillance. Decisions had to be made under pressure, balancing procedure with uncertainty, as every movement of the anomaly was recorded in official logs. The combined focus of interceptor pilots and radar operators created a coordinated yet tense environment, with split-second decisions impacting both observation accuracy and airspace safety. Transcripts indicate that the crews recognized the blip's persistent deviation from expected patterns, heightening their sense of vigilance and underscoring the anomaly's enigmatic nature. Brief periods of synchronization allowed operators to confirm partial alignment between radar returns and interceptor instruments, creating fleeting clarity. These moments provided opportunities to cross-reference position and speed, yet they were temporary. Each interval of apparent normalcy was followed by renewed erratic movement, reinforcing the anomaly's unpredictability. Crew reports emphasize both the hope for resolution and the frustration of encountering a phenomenon that consistently eluded complete understanding. Declassified records preserve every adjustment, signal fluctuation, and course correction, producing a detailed chronology that highlights the mysterious behavior while maintaining procedural precision throughout the observation. Sudden disappearance of the radar returns left both pilots and operators uncertain, with screens reverting to baseline activity despite careful observation of previous anomalies. The blip vanished without warning, leaving no visual confirmation or physical trace. Transcripts record the precise timing of this disappearance and the steps taken to verify system integrity. Operators and pilots maintained composure while completing post-event checks, yet the abrupt cessation added to the anomaly's enigmatic character. The meticulous documentation preserved in declassified logs ensures that every aspect of the encounter, from initial detection to final disappearance, is preserved for analysis, even though the phenomenon itself remains unresolved. Debriefings captured the crew's comprehensive recounting of each observed movement, from rapid accelerations to sudden altitude fluctuations. Analysts reviewing the declassified files noted the extraordinary precision with which operators and pilots recorded the blip's behavior. Logs detail attempts at visual confirmation, cross-referencing of multiple radar feeds, and adherence to standard intercept protocols, all without reaching a definitive explanation. The combination of technical clarity and unexplained phenomena underscores the mystery, a thoroughly documented encounter that resists conventional interpretation, leaving only the procedural account to speak for the event itself. Historical records situate the incident firmly within RAF operational archives of 1956, noting its unique combination of anomalous radar behavior, interceptor engagement, and meticulous logging. Comparisons to other radar anomalies of the era highlight the event's distinctiveness, particularly the object's apparent ability to elude both visual and technological detection intermittently. Analysts acknowledge the precise documentation and disciplined observation, while emphasizing the lack of causality or explanation, preserving the encounter as a Cold War-era enigma. The event's legacy remains defined by data and transcripts rather than physical evidence, reinforcing its unresolved and compelling character. The screens went dark as silently as the blips had appeared, leaving only unanswered questions and the recorded traces of an enigma that lingered over Lakenheath. The RB-47 encounter, Southern United States, 1957. The RB-47's reconnaissance formation maintained strict flight paths over the southern United States when several unidentified objects appeared on the horizon, their movements recorded with precision by the crew and noted in the declassified transcripts. Observers in the cockpit and the reconnaissance equipment operators logged the object's positions, speed, and altitude while maintaining the aircraft's assigned route. The objects performed abrupt maneuvers, weaving in patterns inconsistent with any known aircraft. Crew members verified readings across multiple instruments, and each observation was methodically entered into official logs, reflecting both the disciplined professionalism of the personnel and the immediate sense that they were encountering something beyond ordinary aviation. Following established navigation protocols required constant attention to altitude, heading, and position reports, yet the presence of multiple anomalous objects demanded added vigilance. Crew members continually cross-checked instruments while attempting to maintain composure, aware that these unexpected intrusions could affect the mission's strategic objectives. Flight engineers and radar operators compared readings, confirming that the object's speed and movement did not correspond to weather balloons, conventional aircraft, or other known phenomena. Even minor discrepancies were documented with careful precision, as every variable might later be scrutinized. The RB-47 crew demonstrated procedural discipline, while gradually recognizing that the encounter was far from ordinary. One of the objects executed abrupt maneuvers that no conventional aircraft could achieve, prompting the crew to record its estimated size, shape, and trajectory. Pilots and observers noted sharp climbs, sudden lateral shifts, and accelerations beyond the RB-47's own capabilities. These observations were relayed to the instruments and corroborated against radar data, creating a dual verification that appeared in declassified logs. Crew members also monitored relative proximity to ensure safety, carefully maneuvering the RB-47 to avoid potential collision while gathering precise measurements. The combination of visual and instrument tracking created a detailed record of movements that remained unexplained even after careful post-flight analysis. Radar systems aboard the RB-47 immediately reflected the same objects, confirming that the crew's visual sightings corresponded with measurable signals. Each blip displayed unusual characteristics, including inconsistent speed, abrupt directional changes, and intermittent appearances, suggesting an advanced capacity for evasive movement. Radar operators tracked these blips while comparing them with standard aircraft flight patterns, noting that no registered military or civilian aircraft matched the data. Crew members simultaneously monitored visual observations, radio communications, and instrument readings, producing meticulous transcripts that highlighted the anomaly's unusual behavior without offering any conclusive explanation. Pilots adjusted headings and altitudes to maintain a safe distance while attempting to assess the proximity and behavior of the unknown objects. Every maneuver was carefully logged in the cockpit and radar reports, detailing changes in speed, bearing, and elevation. Crew members worked in synchrony, balancing the need for observation with the aircraft's operational constraints. Occasionally, the objects seemed to anticipate the RB-47's adjustments, accelerating or changing course in ways that challenged the crew's expectations. Declassified files later reflected these sequences, emphasizing both the precision of the crew's documentation and the persistent unpredictability of the phenomena. The unidentified objects performed rapid accelerations and instantaneous course changes, at times disappearing from visual sight and radar screens alike. Crew members noted that even slight turns or descents were accompanied by instrument fluctuations, suggesting a level of maneuverability far beyond conventional aircraft. Every change was meticulously recorded, including estimated distances, angular velocities, and time intervals. Observers in the cockpit and radar room attempted to reconcile these readings, while simultaneously maintaining the RB-47's mission objectives. The combination of visual anomaly and radar confirmation strengthened the credibility of the observation, while deepening the mystery of the object's capabilities. Mission Control monitored the encounter from ground stations, providing updates and confirming the RB-47 crew's observations. Communication logs indicate precise coordination between air and ground units, including repeated verification of radar readings, headings, and estimated positions. Mission Control personnel also provided instructions to maintain safety and flight path discipline, aware that the presence of unknown high-speed objects presented both operational and strategic concerns. The transcripts reflect a collaborative effort between airborne crew and command stations, highlighting adherence to procedure while simultaneously acknowledging the anomaly's extraordinary nature. Attempts to maneuver closer for observation were complicated by the object's unpredictable responses, which included sudden climbs, dives, and lateral shifts that repeatedly outpaced the RB-47's own capabilities. Crew members noted every adjustment and tracked the object's relative position, while ensuring the aircraft remained within mission parameters. Flight engineers, radar operators, and pilots collaborated to maintain control, logging both visual sightings and instrument readings in real time. The resulting record captures a detailed account of the object's behavior, demonstrating that despite their advanced maneuvers, the RB-47 crew maintained strict operational discipline throughout the encounter. At one point, multiple objects appeared to coordinate movements, shifting positions in apparent formation before dispersing rapidly. Observers recorded relative distances, speeds, and angles, noting a level of precision and synchronization that exceeded conventional flight expectations. Crew members were both intrigued and cautious, documenting every observation with attention to detail, aware that even minor miscalculations could affect safety. Analysts reviewing declassified transcripts later emphasized the coordinated nature of these movements, highlighting how the object's behavior consistently defied known aerodynamics and tactical patterns, leaving the encounter unresolved in both technical and operational terms. Eventually, the objects departed, leaving no physical trace or evidence beyond the RB-47's meticulous logs and radar recordings. The crew resumed the reconnaissance mission, maintaining professional discipline while reflecting on the encounter. Every instrument reading, maneuver adjustment, and observation was carefully entered into debriefing documents. Analysts noted the clarity and accuracy of the records, preserving a detailed chronology of an encounter that remained unexplained. The combination of human observation, radar confirmation, and procedural precision ensured that the incident would endure as a documented anomaly, compelling in its mystery yet unresolved by conventional explanation. Documentation from the period classifies the incident as an unexplained mid-air encounter, combining visual confirmation with radar tracking and occurring within the strategic reconnaissance context of 1957. Analysts situate the event alongside other Cold War-era sightings but note its unique combination of multiple objects, precise documentation, and extraordinary maneuvering capabilities. Declassified files preserve every instrument reading, communication exchange, and crew observation, emphasizing the professionalism and attentiveness of the personnel while leaving the origin and purpose of the objects unknown. The encounter remains a compelling example of an event that defies both explanation and expectation. The RB-47 continued on its mission, leaving behind a sky marked only by traces in the instruments and the memory of shapes that vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. The Minot Silence, North Dakota, 1966. The bomber crew followed every standard navigational protocol when sudden anomalies began to ripple across cockpit instruments, their readings fluctuating in ways that suggested an interference beyond mechanical failure and a silence settling over communications that defied explanation. Radar and navigation gauges provided conflicting signals, forcing officers to cross-check against the aircraft's manual instruments while maintaining the flight path over North Dakota. Every observation was meticulously logged, reflecting both the disciplined professionalism of the crew and the growing sense that they were witnessing an event outside ordinary operational experience. Each minor fluctuation was documented, forming a sequence that would later appear in declassified Air Force transcripts. Each crew member maintained assigned duties, monitoring fuel, altitude, and radar sweeps, yet the instruments continued to behave erratically, forcing repeated cross-checks and careful documentation of every irregularity while the flight pressed onward. Operators in the radar room compared readings across multiple systems, noting occasional brief stabilizations followed by sudden failures. Flight engineers meticulously recorded fluctuations in heading, airspeed, and engine output, while pilots adjusted as necessary to maintain mission objectives. The persistent anomalies created a sense of tension that contrasted sharply with the normal routine of long-range bomber reconnaissance, highlighting the unpredictability of the encounter despite disciplined procedure. Sensors and gauges intermittently indicated deviations in heading and altitude, producing conflicting data that the crew meticulously compared against the aircraft's expected performance and the declassified procedural checklists emphasizing caution under uncertainty. Even minor discrepancies were recorded, including slight variations in airspeed or magnetic heading, which normally would have been negligible. Crew members collaborated to reconcile these anomalies, often having to decide whether to trust instrument readings or visual cues. The juxtaposition of routine procedures against unpredictable instrument behavior heightened awareness and unease. Every logging procedure was carried out with precision, creating a record that preserved both the anomaly and the crew's response for future analysis. Radio transmissions to ground control were met with static and sudden cutouts, leaving the crew to attempt emergency protocols and repeated contact attempts while recording each unsuccessful exchange in the official logbook. Each interruption increased operational anxiety, as contact was essential for both safety and mission verification. Pilots alternated frequencies, verified equipment functionality, and attempted relay through secondary systems, yet the silence persisted. Crew members noted the exact duration of each blackout, including partial static-filled transmissions, creating a precise timeline. The resulting declassified transcripts show not only the anomaly itself, but also the disciplined steps taken to maintain communication, highlighting both the crew's skill and the enigmatic nature of the interference. From the Minot Operations Center, controllers noticed intermittent radar echoes and irregular blips that did not match scheduled flight patterns, prompting immediate coordination with the airborne crew while logging every moment of the anomaly. Ground radar operators tracked transient signals appearing and disappearing without explanation. Every attempt to verify aircraft location and heading produced partial or inconsistent readings, raising concerns about possible instrumentation errors or unknown interference. Controllers compared the data with prior reconnaissance patterns and regional aircraft logs, yet no conventional explanation fit the observed anomalies. The coordinated record between airborne crew and ground operators emphasized both the precision and mystery of the encounter. The crew cross-referenced each instrument, noting occasional returns to nominal readings followed by sudden failures, and documented the sequence of irregularities with the disciplined precision of trained bomber personnel. Flight engineers carefully adjusted altimeters, gyroscopes, and navigation computers to detect faults, but anomalies returned unpredictably. Pilots maintained heading and speed according to standard operating procedures while remaining alert to each fluctuation. Observers monitored radar screens, noting discrepancies between visual confirmation and instrument output. Every minor irregularity was entered into the mission log, creating a meticulous record that would later be crucial to investigators attempting to reconstruct the event from declassified files. A growing tension filled the cockpit as the anomalies persisted, with crew members scanning the horizon for any visual confirmation, while simultaneously maintaining strict adherence to operational procedure. Some crew members reported fleeting shapes or shadows, but no consistent visual pattern emerged. The combination of high-altitude isolation and unreliable instrument readings contributed to a palpable unease. Pilots and flight engineers shared observations in real time, documenting every uncertainty while performing routine checks. The transcripts indicate that the crew remained disciplined throughout, recording each fleeting signal and anomaly, even as the silence and unpredictability challenged their training and expectations. Pilots executed standard corrective maneuvers and repeated communication attempts, yet instruments alternately stabilized and faltered again, producing a cycle of fleeting reassurance and renewed uncertainty that was carefully chronicled in the flight log. Attempts to correct heading or altitude through manual input often produced contradictory readings, forcing a reliance on cross-referencing multiple systems. Crew members discussed hypotheses, including atmospheric interference or localized equipment malfunction, but no explanation sufficed. Every entry in the logbook reflected both operational diligence and growing awareness that they were observing something outside known experience, a silent anomaly that persisted throughout the flight and remained unexplained. The combined perspective of airborne crew and ground control produced a synchronized record of anomalies, with radar and instrumentation displaying coordinated, irregular behavior that defied conventional explanation and persisted despite standard troubleshooting. Ground controllers continued to track blips that appeared to drift unpredictably across radar screens, sometimes aligning with minor visual cues from the aircraft. The transcripts show precise timestamps for each anomaly, illustrating both the continuity and unpredictability of the interference. Analysts later noted the synchronization between airborne and ground observations, emphasizing the technical sophistication of the logging and the persistent mystery surrounding the event's origin. As the aircraft completed its assigned mission route, both crew and ground teams continued to monitor instruments and attempted communication, meticulously recording every irregularity while the anomaly gradually receded from detectable range. Even as readings normalized, the experience left a mark on operational memory. Crew members continued documentation for post-flight analysis, ensuring a complete record for Air Force intelligence review. Ground operations maintained detailed logs, capturing both radar data and procedural notes. These meticulous records preserved the encounter as an official declassified incident, highlighting a rare episode where professional discipline intersected with an unexplained aerial anomaly. Historical archives preserve the Minot silence as an unresolved event, highlighting the crew's procedural discipline and the simultaneous reliability and inexplicability of instruments that captured an encounter that remains officially unexplained. Analysts have referenced the event in comparative studies of mid-20th century Air Force incidents, noting its combination of instrument anomalies, communication failures, and fleeting visual observation. The episode exemplifies how trained crews operating under rigorous Cold War protocols faced unexplained phenomena that left no physical evidence but produced comprehensive records. Declassified files underscore both the meticulousness of the crew and the enduring unanswered questions surrounding the incident. Every log entry, every instrument fluctuation, and every failed transmission pointed to a silence that left no trace, yet refused to be forgotten. Operation Highjump Overflight, Antarctica, 1947. The Antarctic expanse stretched beneath the aircraft in an unbroken canvas of white, and it was during this overflight that crew members first noted lights and reflections that defied explanation, flickering across the horizon in ways inconsistent with natural phenomena. Observers recorded patterns that shifted too quickly and with trajectories that did not align with any known aerial or terrestrial sources. Instruments measured no corresponding atmospheric or magnetic anomalies sufficient to explain the sightings, and every fleeting appearance was logged meticulously. The combination of extreme isolation, the precision of military observation, and the sudden emergence of unexplainable lights created a tension that would echo in declassified transcripts for decades. Every officer maintained strict observation and recording duties, monitoring altimeters, compasses and visual sectors, while documenting the unusual optical effects that appeared intermittently, demanding precise triangulation and immediate notation for post-flight analysis. Crew members divided responsibilities to ensure continuous monitoring across multiple instruments and observational sectors, cross-referencing visual sightings with navigational data. Flight engineers adjusted for potential distortions from ice glare and atmospheric refraction, while pilots maintained standard cruising altitude. The procedures highlighted both the operational rigor of the crew and the challenge of distinguishing anomalies from environmental effects, reinforcing the meticulous care that would later characterize official mission logs. Fleeting shapes appeared on the ice or in the sky, some reflecting sun glints, others moving against prevailing wind currents, prompting pilots and observers to attempt careful identification while avoiding any assumption beyond verifiable evidence. Attempts to discern whether the lights originated from ice crystals, snowdrifts, or potential aircraft proved inconclusive, as movements often contradicted known physics for small objects in such conditions. Crew members maintained detailed sketch diagrams logging angular velocity, apparent distance, and relative brightness for each occurrence. These notes created a comparative framework that would allow analysts to evaluate the phenomena scientifically while preserving the mystery of events that remained unexplained. Radar screens intermittently registered blips that did not correspond to any known aircraft or terrain features, creating a pattern of partial corroboration between instruments and human observation that left the crew both intrigued and unsettled. Each radar echo appeared and vanished without warning, sometimes aligning with visual anomalies and sometimes occurring in isolation. Flight engineers calibrated the systems repeatedly, confirming that no mechanical malfunction could account for the readings. The juxtaposition of sporadic instrument confirmation with fleeting visual phenomena heightened the sense of an encounter outside ordinary reconnaissance operations, leaving crew members to balance operational caution with investigative curiosity. The harsh polar environment added layers of complexity, as extreme cold and atmospheric refraction occasionally distorted visual and electronic readings, requiring repeated cross-checks and adjustments to ensure accurate documentation of each anomaly. Ice crystals refracted sunlight across the horizon, producing brief flares that could resemble moving objects, yet careful measurement often revealed deviations inconsistent with purely natural effects. Crew members documented temperature, wind speed, and atmospheric pressure for every sighting, ensuring that each entry reflected environmental conditions. Despite these precautions, many anomalies could not be attributed to the polar landscape, leaving a lingering sense of ambiguity that persisted long after instruments stabilized. Reports from other aircraft in formation confirmed similar phenomena, though slight differences in position and perspective introduced discrepancies that forced a meticulous comparison of all observational logs and flight instruments. Pilots relayed descriptions of lights and irregular shapes, occasionally overlapping with sightings from other planes, but never fully matching in trajectory or intensity. Crew members compared notes in real time, coordinating terminology and positional references to avoid misinterpretation. The resulting dataset highlighted both the reliability of professional observation and the inconsistencies inherent in human perception under extreme conditions, underscoring the enduring challenge of interpreting phenomena in the Antarctic theatre. Pilots altered course to follow the most persistent anomalies, carefully noting changes in altitude, speed, and bearing, while observers recorded each irregular motion against the stark Antarctic backdrop, mindful of both environmental effects and potential misinterpretation. Adjustments were made incrementally to maintain formation integrity and fuel efficiency, even as some crew members questioned the feasibility of tracking objects that appeared erratically. Flight engineers monitored power consumption, avionics output, and navigation stability, ensuring that deviations in equipment readings did not compromise safety. The meticulous record-keeping emphasized the contrast between operational procedure and the unpredictability of the unexplained, reinforcing the enduring mystery of the observations. From the operations ship-based observation deck, naval personnel tracked fleeting radar echoes and unusual visual glimmers that occasionally aligned with aircraft sightings, producing a multi-perspective record that captured both clarity and ambiguity in equal measure. Observers noted reflections off the ice surface, possible auroral distortions, and rapid movements that could not be explained by known meteorological phenomena. Every anomalous reading was logged with timestamps and precise coordinates, creating an archival record that paralleled the flight crew's documentation. The convergence of airborne and shipboard observations strengthened the credibility of the encounter while maintaining the unresolved quality of the visual and instrumental anomalies. Sudden bursts of light and movement appeared near the ice surface, vanishing almost immediately, and crew members struggled to differentiate between optical illusions, atmospheric phenomena, and objects of unknown origin while recording every measurable detail. Patterns emerged sporadically, sometimes following a linear trajectory, sometimes shifting abruptly, suggesting that if any object was present, its behavior defied conventional understanding. Pilots and observers documented angular speed, estimated altitude, and size comparisons against familiar reference points. Despite the precision of these logs, no explanation satisfied both environmental physics and observational data simultaneously, leaving analysts with a record that was technically detailed but fundamentally mysterious. As the mission concluded, the anomalies gradually faded from sight and radar, yet the crew's logs reflected every irregularity with precision, ensuring that no observation, however brief or confounding, would be lost to the passage of time. Even as normal operational readings resumed, the impact of the unexplained events persisted in crew debriefings. Analysts later noted the careful calibration and disciplined recording methods used throughout the flight, emphasizing the combination of professional rigor and the enigmatic quality of the anomalies. The overflight's conclusion marked the end of direct observation but the beginning of decades of scrutiny in declassified archives. Military archives preserve this Operation Highjump overflight as a case of enduring mystery, illustrating the combination of extreme conditions, careful documentation, and phenomena that remain unexplained despite rigorous scientific and military observation. Subsequent studies of Antarctic reconnaissance have referenced the mission, noting both environmental hazards and unexplained sightings that align in time with official mission logs. The transcripts demonstrate a disciplined, systematic approach to observation, underscoring the crew's professionalism even as they encountered events without precedent. Historians and analysts continue to debate interpretations, emphasizing that thorough documentation cannot always resolve the unknown. All readings and documented anomalies suggested a presence or effect that the Antarctic sky had concealed, leaving the memory of the flight both meticulously chronicled and irretrievably enigmatic. The Kinro Scramble, Lake Superior, 1953. A sudden blip appeared on the radar, too erratic to dismiss, and the operator's fingers hovered over switches as they called for immediate action. The anomaly moved with a speed and trajectory that defied conventional aircraft patterns, prompting urgent coordination between Lake Superior's control tower and the regional Air Force squadron. Every second mattered. Crew members logged altitude, bearing, and signal strength while verifying instrument reliability against environmental interference. The frozen expanse below reflected radar signals inconsistently, yet operators confirmed the object's persistence. The scramble was not routine. It demanded an instantaneous response, blending precise military protocol with the unsettling uncertainty of encountering something entirely unaccounted for. The pilot vaulted into the cockpit, heart racing, instruments glowing, calculating a takeoff trajectory that left no margin for error over the frozen lake. Gloves secured, harness fastened, the pilot ran through checklists that had been drilled countless times, yet now felt impossibly urgent. Ground control provided precise headings, while altimeters and gyroscopic indicators flickered in the low winter light. Every gauge was scrutinized, every lever double-checked, for the anomaly's unpredictable behavior demanded complete operational readiness. As engines roared, the pilot's eyes darted between instruments and the horizon, mentally rehearsing maneuvers while knowing that any delay or misjudgment could mean losing the object, and perhaps losing control over the rapidly unfolding encounter entirely. Gusts of icy wind battered the jet as it lifted off, the horizon a blur of snow and cloud, each second demanding split-second focus. The cold whipped across the canopy, frosting instruments and obscuring peripheral vision. Pilots adjusted throttle and trim constantly, countering turbulence while scanning for the anomaly reported below. Tiny, fleeting reflections occasionally caught the eye, but nothing matched the radar readings consistently. Even the lake's frozen surface produced deceptive glints, requiring immediate discernment to distinguish artifact from object. With each passing moment, the pilot's senses sharpened, balancing fear and instinct, as the chase over Lake Superior became a battle between human skill, mechanical capability, and a presence whose very nature remained unknown. Through a narrow break in the overcast, a metallic glint streaked across the skyline, prompting an instant reflexive maneuver from the pilot. The object appeared to accelerate faster than any known aircraft, weaving in and out of clouds and glimmering sunlight. Observers noted the jet's abrupt climb and sharp banking as the pilot attempted to close the distance, all while maintaining safe altitude and avoiding the frozen surface. Instrument readings fluctuated rapidly, tracking speed and direction that sometimes contradicted visual observation. Every turn and climb was recorded, cross-referenced, and radioed back to ground operators, capturing both the intensity of the pursuit and the strangeness of an object behaving with seemingly impossible agility. The object shifted abruptly, darting at impossible angles, forcing the fighter to accelerate in ways that tested both the aircraft and human endurance. Pilots described vertical climbs, sudden lateral changes, and near instantaneous reversals that conventional training could not fully anticipate. Each maneuver strained the airframe and required precise counteraction to maintain control. Instrumentation logged every variation in speed, bearing, and elevation, producing data that would later defy explanation. The anomaly seemed to respond to the fighter's presence, yet its movements were never fully predictable. The pursuit created a tense rhythm, a high-stakes interplay between mechanical capability, human reflex, and the enigmatic force moving just beyond comprehension. From the radar tower, operators squinted at the erratic screen, attempting to reconcile blips that appeared, vanished, and reappeared against a backdrop of static and snow. Some echoes correlated with visual observations, while others seemed entirely independent. Coordination with the pilot relied on fast, precise communication. Ground staff read altitude, heading, and signal strength aloud, adjusting instructions based on conflicting data. The repeated inconsistencies amplified tension, forcing a meticulous record of each observation. Analysts later noted that the tower logs captured more than the object's position. They documented the interplay between perception, instrumentation, and environmental conditions that complicated attempts to understand the anomaly's behavior during this high-intensity scramble. Adrenaline surged as the pilot's mind raced between instinct and instrument readings, while a lingering doubt gnawed at the certainty of what was being observed. The object appeared capable of speeds and directional changes far beyond jet capabilities in 1953, challenging both expectations and training. Eyes scanned the horizon, comparing fleeting reflections against radar guidance, while hands adjusted throttle and rudder simultaneously. Split-second judgments became routine, yet the unpredictability of the phenomenon created a subtle, persistent anxiety. Every maneuver combined operational skill with improvisation, as the pilot sought to track an entity whose parameters exceeded known physical possibilities, leaving both the aircraft and human cognition stretched to their limits. Sharp turns, bursts of acceleration, and sudden dives defined the pursuit, each maneuver recorded in a flurry of visual and instrument notes that barely kept pace. The fighter weaved above and around cloud banks, attempting to align with fleeting glimpses of the object. Radar operators shouted corrections, observing echoes that sometimes lagged or led relative to visual sighting. Observers noted the pilot's repeated climbs and dives, producing telemetry logs that would later highlight anomalies in acceleration, bearing, and estimated size. Every attempt to gain or maintain visual contact revealed the object's resistance to conventional tracking, reinforcing both the tension of the moment and the lasting perplexity that would mark the encounter as extraordinary. Discrepancies between radar and visual sightings grew pronounced, leaving both pilot and tower operators frustrated by conflicting confirmations and disappearing targets. Blips appeared momentarily only to vanish, while visual traces sometimes indicated a different trajectory entirely. Operators recalibrated instruments repeatedly, ensuring no technical error could account for the inconsistency. Pilot reports mirrored the confusion, noting sudden flashes that contradicted expectations of movement. The juxtaposition of verified readings and fleeting observation created a multi-layered record, meticulously documented yet fundamentally perplexing. Even after repeated cross-references, the data refused a coherent pattern, leaving analysts decades later to confront an incident both technically verified and irreducibly mysterious. As the chase extended over the frozen lake, the object abruptly vanished, leaving the jet alone in a landscape that suddenly seemed impossibly vast and empty. The pilots stabilized the aircraft, scanning the ice and cloud for any residual trace, yet nothing remained. Radar operators reported fading echoes, instruments returned to baseline, and the silence of the winter sky accentuated the emptiness. Crew members logged every coordinate, altitude, and time stamp, preserving the encounter in meticulous detail. Despite the exhaustive records, the sudden disappearance reinforced the anomaly's elusiveness, leaving both human and machine with a memory of pursuit without resolution, a transient presence that could not be reconciled with known technology or environmental factors. Contemporary documentation preserves the scramble in vivid detail, highlighting the extraordinary maneuvers, split-second decisions, and enduring uncertainty that remain unsolved. Analysts emphasize the combination of rapid decision-making, precise instrumentation, and environmental hazards that shaped the encounter. Histories of the Kinro scramble note the unprecedented agility and speed of the object, contrasting it with the limitations of contemporary jets. Every recorded blip, visual confirmation, and maneuvered response contributes to a comprehensive yet unresolved case study. The persistence of meticulous records underscores both the professionalism of the Air Force personnel involved and the enduring enigma that has resisted definitive explanation for decades. Instrumentation noting flashes, blips, and reflexive maneuvers during the Kinro scramble hinted at a presence over Lake Superior that eluded understanding, leaving the incident recorded yet fundamentally unexplained. Cold War shadows over Japan, 1952. Preparations on the tarmac were meticulous, each instrument calibrated and every flight plan scrutinized before the reconnaissance mission over northern Japan commenced. Pilots reviewed maps, noting strategic locations along coastlines and mountain ranges, while navigators checked gyroscopes and radio equipment for consistency. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, yet the tension was palpable. The early Cold War climate demanded vigilance, and even routine flights carried geopolitical significance. Fuel lines, radar circuits, and communication channels were tested repeatedly, ensuring that no technical failure could compromise the mission. Every action was documented, from weight distribution to pre-flight checklists, forming a foundation of certainty in an operation already poised on the edge of uncertainty. At cruising altitude, the crew noted unusual interference on early radar sweeps, subtle irregularities that refused to align with standard readings. The signals appeared as faint blips, occasionally splitting or disappearing altogether, inconsistent with any known aircraft or atmospheric reflection. Operators adjusted frequency and gain, confirming that the equipment functioned correctly, yet the anomalies persisted. Navigators recorded bearings while noting cloud coverage and magnetic interference that could account for minor deviations. Even with careful cross-checking, the readings suggested an object, or series of objects, moving in ways that defied typical reconnaissance expectations. The crew remained alert, aware that these initial signals could either be benign artifacts or the first signs of an encounter that would challenge understanding. Cloud formations and jet streams distorted visual confirmation, creating ghostly patterns across the coastline that challenged both eyes and instruments. Wisps of mist over mountain ridges produced fleeting illusions of movement, while shifting sunlight caused reflections on rivers and inlets. Pilots and navigators scanned constantly, discerning natural optical phenomena from potential aircraft or other unidentified aerial presences. Instruments corroborated some visual observations but contradicted others, deepening the uncertainty. Even the most experienced crew members felt the tension of interpreting fleeting impressions at hundreds of miles per hour. Every glance and every adjustment became a deliberate act of observation, a careful attempt to extract reality from a sky full of illusions and shifting shadows. A fleeting silhouette appeared beyond the mountain ridges, partially illuminated by the afternoon sun, prompting cautious reports from the navigator to the cockpit. The object's shape was indistinct, yet it moved with a smooth, deliberate motion unlike any conventional aircraft. Pilots adjusted course to maintain visual contact while radar operators attempted to correlate the sighting with instrument readings. For several tense minutes, the crew tracked the anomaly as it rose and dipped along the horizon, only to disappear momentarily behind cloud cover. The navigator's log reflected both excitement and restraint, emphasizing descriptive precision over conjecture. Even as the crew attempted to interpret the sighting, the object defied classification, hovering between perception and ambiguity. Anomalies persisted in rhythm, intermittent radar blips, faint lights moving counter to prevailing winds, and visual cues that lacked consistent explanation. Each repetition reinforced the sense that the flight was encountering something outside standard reconnaissance experience. Operators meticulously adjusted antenna alignment, recalibrated altimeters, and noted environmental conditions, producing a series of corroborated yet contradictory data points. The pilots maneuvered cautiously, balancing the need for observation with the risk of overextending into unknown airspace. Logs from the mission would later highlight these recurring patterns, underscoring the challenge of interpreting partial evidence while maintaining operational safety. The tension grew steadily, a cumulative weight pressing on crew judgment and perception. As evening fell, shadows deepened over the waters and hills, stretching familiar landmarks into unfamiliar forms that unsettled even experienced observers. Dusk brought low light and deceptive contrasts, complicating visual tracking and creating illusions of movement where none existed. Coastal reflections glimmered intermittently on instruments, further challenging interpretation. Crew members documented every sighting meticulously, noting angles, approximate distances, and environmental conditions. Even simple terrain features appeared unfamiliar in the fading light, adding to the cognitive load. The combination of shadow, light, and altitude transformed the reconnaissance mission into an intricate exercise of discernment, with every observation subject to multiple possible explanations. The crew debated the possibilities over radio chatter, weighing technical malfunctions against foreign aircraft or atmospheric phenomena, each hypothesis unconfirmed. Navigator and pilot reviewed radar logs, cross-referencing sighting times and coordinates, attempting to discern any pattern. Some blips matched previous reports, while others contradicted visual observations entirely. Communication with ground control added further detail but introduced additional uncertainty as operators struggled with static and minor instrument lag. The dialogue was precise, technical, and tense, reflecting the crew's dual responsibility to report accurately while avoiding false interpretation. Despite the exhaustive discussion, no consensus emerged, leaving the anomalies unresolved and the flight crew increasingly aware of their own limits of perception. During a brief ascent, the object, or shadow, seemed to adjust relative to the plane's path, creating fleeting correlations across multiple instruments. Radar operators noted a subtle tracking pattern that suggested a response to the jet's maneuvers, though inconsistencies remained. Pilots described slight deviations in visual alignment, as if the anomaly anticipated movement without a clear purpose. Atmospheric conditions, variable winds and temperature gradients could not fully account for the behavior, and navigators recorded timestamps with exceptional precision to capture the phenomenon. This convergence of optical and electronic evidence reinforced the sense of a tangible, though elusive, presence. The crew maintained disciplined focus, documenting every metric while recognizing that interpretation might remain forever uncertain. Detailed logs were taken in real time, tracking coordinates, altitude, and sighting intervals, producing records that appeared precise yet contradictory. Every entry reflected careful observation. Speed estimates, angular displacement, and environmental notes were recorded alongside qualitative assessments of appearance and movement. Some entries confirmed earlier anomalies, while others suggested temporary disappearance or instrumental artifacts. Historians reviewing the mission emphasized the rigor of these records, underscoring the meticulous nature of military documentation during Cold War reconnaissance. Yet the contradictions within the data highlight the inherent challenge of capturing an encounter that defied conventional understanding, leaving a complex but ultimately unresolved record. Before returning to base, the anomaly vanished entirely, leaving instruments stable but minds unsettled, each crew member replaying the fleeting encounter. The remaining flight continued without further incident, yet every glance at the sky or radar screen carried a reminder of the unexplained. Pilots maintained standard protocol while gradually descending toward home airspace, but the mental impression of irregular movement lingered. Crew discussions focused on accuracy and caution, reinforcing the discipline required for Cold War reconnaissance. Every observation was logged carefully, and the disappearance of the anomaly left behind only a trail of meticulous records and unresolved questions, cementing the encounter as a persistent, documented mystery. Declassified transcripts preserve the day's reconnaissance with meticulous precision, documenting every reading, every shadow, and every unexplained irregularity noted by the crew. Analysts later examined radar logs, pilot reports, and environmental conditions in detail, attempting to reconcile discrepancies. Historical accounts emphasize the object's sporadic visibility, partial radar confirmation, and timing correlations, while also acknowledging persistent contradictions. Despite exhaustive record-keeping and review, no definitive explanation has emerged. The crew's disciplined observations provide a rare, factual glimpse into Cold War-era aerial anomalies, offering both insight into operational practice and enduring mystery. Strange signals and unexplained movements recorded during the flight hinted at something beyond known aircraft and atmospheric phenomena, leaving the encounter permanently unresolved. The Valentic Parallel, Military Cross-Reference, 1978. Frederick Valentic's Cessna departed from Moorabbin with routine intent, yet early radio transmissions hinted at an unease that would soon escalate over Bass Strait. The young pilot reported normal conditions at first, describing clear skies and calm winds, but within minutes he noted an unusual light in the distance. His voice, steady but tinged with uncertainty, detailed the object's apparent size and brightness. Ground controllers logged every word meticulously, noting not only the content but the cadence and inflection. The aircraft's instruments remained stable, yet a sense of growing tension suffused the flight, presaging the inexplicable series of events that would follow. Within minutes, Valentic reported a metallic object moving above and around his aircraft, its lights reflecting off the water in ways that defied conventional explanation. He described the object's maneuvers as deliberate, moving against prevailing winds and accelerating beyond expected aircraft capabilities. Radio operators documented these observations verbatim, later cross-referencing them with radar data to determine potential flight paths. Pilots and analysts would debate whether atmospheric conditions could account for the phenomena, noting that reflections, temperature inversions, or mirages might distort perception. Still, the combination of visual sighting and auditory report established a credible basis for deeper investigation, marking the first tangible connection between pilot testimony and technical observation. Radar operators monitoring military channels noted anomalies on the scope, irregular echoes that appeared briefly before disappearing, inconsistent with standard aircraft signatures. The blips manifested intermittently, sometimes aligning with Valentic's reported positions, but often vanishing or shifting unpredictably. Technicians meticulously recalibrated instruments, ruling out malfunctions while documenting every irregularity in official logs. These intermittent returns challenged both operator expectations and standard air traffic protocols, prompting analysts to maintain heightened vigilance. The precise coordinates of each radar signature were recorded and later compared with other regional flights to rule out conventional aircraft, meteorological disturbances, or interference. The resulting documentation suggested an encounter that was both fleeting and technically anomalous. Analysts cross-referenced the pilot's descriptions with instrument logs, comparing altitude, trajectory, and speed, attempting to reconcile visual reports with technical readings. Valentic's statements indicated that the object remained above his aircraft while performing rapid vertical and horizontal shifts. Flight data, although limited, partially corroborated the presence of an aerial anomaly, but failed to offer full confirmation. Experts considered environmental factors such as thermals, solar glare, and radar reflections, noting that each explanation could only partially account for observed behavior. The discrepancies between visual and instrumental evidence highlighted the challenges inherent in reconciling eyewitness accounts with empirical measurement, creating an enduring ambiguity that would define the incident in historical records. A review of historical declassified transcripts revealed similar instances where aircraft experienced inexplicable aerial presences, suggesting a pattern across decades and regions. Reports from military reconnaissance and commercial flights documented transient lights, radar anomalies, and sudden disappearances, often without clear resolution. Analysts noted recurring characteristics: rapid movement, sudden altitude changes, and occasional radio interference. Cross-referencing these events provided context for Valentic's encounter, placing it within a broader framework of aerial anomalies that defied conventional explanation. While each incident occurred under different conditions, the consistency of key details prompted speculation about shared phenomena or underlying causes that remained unidentified, reinforcing the sense of a persistent mystery. Radio distortions intensified sporadically, overlaying Valentic's voice with static and tonal shifts that would later be catalogued alongside previous unexplained encounters. Ground operators documented intermittent interference that coincided with reported movements of the object, though correlations were never perfectly synchronized. The crew on monitoring stations noted that such distortions occasionally occurred in prior military reports, suggesting either environmental interaction or unknown technological influence. Each interruption required careful annotation, distinguishing between conventional communication interference and anomalies potentially linked to observed objects. The pattern of distortion, combined with visual and radar data, contributed to the unusual nature of the event and underscored the meticulous observational methods employed to preserve factual accuracy in the official record. Military units dispatched in response recorded intermittent radar returns that aligned partially with the reported lights, yet no direct confirmation of an aircraft or object was established. Intercept attempts were limited by geographic constraints and instrument sensitivity, with each unit logging radar blips that appeared only momentarily. Air traffic coordination emphasized caution, avoiding potential collisions while maintaining observation protocols. These partial confirmations added credibility to Valentic's claims without fully explaining the phenomenon, leaving operators with tangible yet incomplete evidence. Documentation highlighted both the presence of anomalies and the inability to capture sustained verification, reinforcing the pattern of fleeting, unexplained aerial encounters that mirrored other historical cases in military archives. Each log, notation, and coordinate was meticulously documented, producing a dataset that both illuminated and complicated the broader pattern of aerial anomalies. Analysts catalogued flight times, radio frequencies, and environmental conditions, correlating them with radar returns and eyewitness reports. Every detail was preserved, from light intensity estimates to altitude markers, forming a comprehensive account of the mission. Despite this precision, inconsistencies remained, and many entries contradicted one another in subtle ways. Historians reviewing these documents later emphasized that the rigor of record-keeping both clarified certain aspects of the encounter and underscored the enduring uncertainty, illustrating how systematic observation can coexist with unresolved phenomena. The final transmission from Valentic ended abruptly, leaving an echo on the frequency and an enduring question in military records about what, if anything, had been encountered. His last words described a large object orbiting above him, before cutting off mid-sentence, leaving ground operators stunned. Search and rescue operations commenced immediately, but the Cessna and the pilot were never recovered. Investigators examined radar logs, weather reports, and prior sightings for potential explanations, yet no concrete evidence of wreckage or alternative cause emerged. The abrupt silence became the defining element of the case, representing the intersection of human observation, technical monitoring, and unexplained aerial behaviour, leaving a permanent void in the historical record. Cross-referencing past reports with Valentic's flight revealed repeated similarities: fleeting lights, radar inconsistencies, and the sudden absence of any traceable object. Analysts noted that many of these historical parallels involved similar flight paths, atmospheric conditions, and intermittent instrument readings. Comparative charts illustrated recurring patterns of brief observation, followed by immediate disappearance, challenging conventional aeronautical interpretation. The data emphasized the absence of definitive causation, reinforcing the possibility of unknown variables influencing both perception and instrumentation. Each reference point strengthened the notion that Valentic's encounter, while unique in its outcome, fit into a broader sequence of unexplained aerial events spanning decades. Historical records preserved in declassified files highlight the recurrence of these anomalies, noting precision in documentation but offering no definitive resolution. Detailed logs, technical reports and pilot testimonies reveal a persistent theme of observation without explanation. Analysts emphasize the fidelity of the records while acknowledging the limits of interpretation. The juxtaposition of careful documentation against the absence of tangible conclusions underscores the central mystery of the Valentic case. Although decades of review and cross-referencing have provided extensive context, no single variable, object or environmental factor accounts for the full scope of observed phenomena, leaving the incident firmly in the domain of unresolved aerial anomalies. Unidentified phenomena, sudden irregularities, and mysterious patterns traced across decades point to a puzzle the records themselves seem unwilling to resolve. The Blue Book Control Tower calls, Midwest, USA, 1951. Voices crackled over the control tower intercom as a junior operator noticed an inconsistency in scheduled flight reports, a discrepancy that immediately drew the attention of the supervising staff. At first glance, it appeared routine, a delayed arrival, a misreported altitude, but the anomaly persisted, manifesting as an unusual movement on the primitive radar screens. Operators consulted their notebooks and relayed the readings to other nearby stations, noting a faint irregular blip that moved against expected air traffic patterns. The initial uncertainty created a quiet tension in the room as experienced personnel struggled to reconcile what they observed with known aircraft behaviour. The veteran supervisor leaned forward, scrutinizing the instruments while instructing staff to focus visually on the skies. Binoculars and clear windows offered only fleeting glimpses, yet the operators reported lights and shapes that did not correspond with commercial or military schedules. In some cases, the lights hovered, then accelerated in ways that defied standard flight capabilities. Handwritten logs captured each observation, detailing angles, times, and trajectories. Although the phenomenon appeared small and fleeting, the meticulous notes hinted at something persistent and unusual, pressing the operators to treat it as more than a simple clerical or mechanical error. Messages bounced between towers as operators relayed fragmented descriptions, each attempt to corroborate movements adding to the growing tension. Nearby stations recorded intermittent blips at similar coordinates, though radar signatures were inconsistent and sometimes absent. The operators' conversations were cautious, precise, and occasionally interrupted by static or unidentifiable noises on the lines. In each call, voices described movement in unexpected directions and sudden appearances where no aircraft should have been. These exchanges, later preserved in Blue Book transcripts, reflected a professional effort to reconcile human observation with imperfect technological tracking, capturing a fleeting mystery in real time. Sudden interruptions in routine transmissions punctuated the calls, with tones and static patterns suggesting unusual interference. Operators noted fluctuations on multiple frequencies, occasionally cutting off messages mid-sentence. Attempts to distinguish equipment malfunction from genuine phenomena became a central concern, as nothing in standard maintenance logs explained the anomalies. Staff members exchanged cautious glances, aware that the combination of visual and radio irregularities defied normal explanation. The tension heightened when simultaneous lights were spotted at different elevations, prompting repeated scanning and cross-referencing with schedules. At that moment, the tower's methodical environment transformed into a scene of persistent uncertainty, demanding both attention and restraint. Historians reviewing the declassified Blue Book documents later highlighted these episodes as part of a recurring pattern across Midwestern airfields. They noted that the anomalies often involved short-duration radar blips, simultaneous visual sightings, and subtle but deliberate maneuvers inconsistent with conventional flight. Control tower personnel had followed strict procedures, verifying radar performance, weather conditions, and airspace clearance before documenting the incidents. Even decades later, the reports reveal a meticulous effort to capture what was observed without speculation, emphasizing the professionalism and caution exercised by personnel who recorded something that remained inexplicable. Each observer provided differing accounts of light, speed, and direction, forcing analysts to reconcile human perception with partial technical data. One operator described a greenish glow moving low over the farmland, while another recorded a high-altitude blip that vanished as suddenly as it appeared. Logbooks show repeated attempts to measure speed and altitude, often producing contradictory results that left operators unsure if they were tracking the same object. These discrepancies did not reduce the mystery. Instead, they enhanced the sense of an elusive presence operating beyond the limitations of contemporary radar and visual technology, captured only in fragments of procedural notation. Procedural checklists were meticulously followed, examining electrical systems, weather logs, and prior flight paths, yet each potential explanation fell short of accounting for the anomalies. No known aircraft, weather balloon, or atmospheric effect could fully match the observations. Operators noted that reflections, interference, and instrument lag were all considered and ruled out wherever possible. The meticulous documentation highlights both the limitations of early 1950s radar systems and the care taken by control personnel to distinguish between mechanical artifacts and genuine aerial events. Every procedural step emphasized the unusual nature of the recordings, underscoring the tension between observation and explanation. Coordinated radio verification between nearby stations revealed overlapping reports, suggesting a phenomenon both widespread in observation and elusive in concrete detection. Towers hundreds of miles apart recorded similar anomalies, with light patterns, speeds, and erratic movement noted across multiple sites. Operators exchanged carefully phrased messages, sometimes pausing to allow cross-checking of both radar screens and visual lookout points. These collaborative efforts were later cited in Blue Book analyses as evidence of multiple independent observations that could not easily be attributed to single aircraft misidentification or instrument error. The simultaneous documentation amplified the sense of mystery in the otherwise routine air traffic environment. Fragments of audio transcripts preserved in the records captured abrupt, unfinished sentences, reflecting the operator's growing unease as objects appeared and vanished unpredictably. Voices stopped mid-thought, call signs are repeated in questioning tones, and occasional laughter hints at nervous disbelief. Logs reveal attempts to coordinate with local airports, but many observations were concluded before full verification was possible. The documentation suggests a shared human response to uncertainty, professionalism tempered by a quiet recognition that something was being observed that did not conform to conventional explanation, leaving gaps where understanding should have been. Even after repeated cross-referencing, no aircraft registration, flight plan, or environmental factor could definitively explain the persistent, unexplained occurrences in the logs. Analysis of historical air traffic records showed no flights capable of producing the observed patterns. Weather reports confirmed clear skies and calm conditions in most regions, ruling out common meteorological explanations. Operators' notes, preserved with care, convey an unusual balance of certainty and confusion, showing that procedural diligence captured details that remain inexplicable. The events became a testament to both human observation and the persistent limits of early radar technology in the face of the unknown. Operators documented the events with precision, yet the mysterious activity remained unresolved, a carefully recorded anomaly resisting classification. Every notation, communication, and radar sweep became a permanent record of something witnessed but not understood. Blue Book files preserved the careful language of professional observation, highlighting discrepancies and repeated verification attempts while never offering a resolution. These records provide a rare window into Midwestern air traffic operations, showing how highly trained personnel confronted a phenomenon that could not be explained, even after exhaustive procedural checks and cross-station collaboration. The logs and transmissions remain intact, yet the phenomena they record continue to evade explanation, lingering at the edge of comprehension. The Greenland Intercept Logs, Thule Air Base 1962. Anomalous readings appeared first as subtle deviations, barely distinguishable from the background noise of standard radar sweeps. The operators at Thule Air Base initially regarded them as minor glitches or artifacts of the harsh Arctic environment, but the patterns persisted beyond routine expectation. Instruments repeatedly recorded faint echoes that seemed to move with unnatural precision, defying familiar flight paths. Every pulse returned on schedule, yet the anomalies shifted in ways inconsistent with conventional aircraft behavior. As the morning progressed, technicians began documenting these irregularities with heightened attention, aware that such persistence in the data could indicate an unknown phenomenon that challenged the limits of contemporary radar technology. Icy winds pressed against the base structures, muting sound but amplifying the sense of isolation felt by the crew inside. The Arctic landscape stretched beyond the horizon, unbroken and indifferent, its whiteness reflecting the pale sunlight that barely warmed the base. Inside the radar room, monitors flickered with bursts of static and intermittent readings, and the persistent hum of electrical systems filled the enclosed space. Crew members noted the psychological strain that accompanied extended observation in such an unforgiving environment, aware that fatigue and monotony could warp perception. Yet the signals continued, objective and impersonal, demanding attention that could not be ignored. A fleeting visual glimmer above the horizon coincided with a spike on the instruments, leaving operators uncertain if it was real or imagined. Some technicians claimed to catch a brief silhouette moving against the horizon, too quick and indistinct to identify. The logs captured a radar echo at the exact moment, suggesting that something tangible had entered the radar's detection field. Observers debated whether optical illusions caused by sunlight on drifting ice or atmospheric refraction could explain the discrepancy. The anomaly's brief but consistent recurrence convinced the crew to treat the observation with professional seriousness, marking it as a priority for ongoing documentation in both written and electronic logs. Transmissions to supporting stations crackled with partial reports, as every attempt to communicate the observations was interrupted by static and delay. Operators at Toul struggled to convey both numerical data and qualitative descriptions, often repeating phrases to ensure accuracy. Nearby radar posts attempted to verify readings, only to report slightly different positions and velocities, leaving analysts to interpret a web of fragmented information. Control personnel coordinated through shortwave channels, noting the potential for miscommunication in extreme cold and magnetic interference. The logs reveal the meticulous care taken to preserve fidelity, showing that despite the irregularities, the crew sought to maintain scientific rigor in the face of uncertainty. Technicians pored over navigational data, attempting to align readings with expected flight paths, yet the anomalies refused to conform. Calculations of speed, altitude, and vector failed to match any known aircraft, balloon, or atmospheric phenomenon. The Thule intercept team reviewed historical flight plans, airspace restrictions, and meteorological records, trying to reconcile the signals with legitimate traffic. Despite the exhaustive analysis, the echoes moved with an irregularity that suggested intelligence or a behavior pattern beyond standard instrumentation. Each recalculation reinforced the enigma, as data from multiple instruments consistently suggested the presence of an object, or perhaps several, that eluded conventional identification methods. Cross-referenced logs from nearby Arctic patrols produced fragmented confirmation, though patterns and timings remained inconsistent across stations. Some echoes registered simultaneously, while others appeared minutes apart, as if the anomaly shifted unpredictably between different detection points. Documentation indicates that operators debated whether these discrepancies resulted from technical error, atmospheric interference, or a genuinely elusive phenomenon. Still, even partial verification from multiple sources lent weight to the observations. Analysts carefully catalogued each entry, preserving the differences without attempting premature synthesis. The result was a set of corroborated yet unresolved records, capturing the tension between human perception, technological reliability, and the unknown. Operators recorded conflicting accounts of altitude, speed, and movement, forcing analysts to weigh the reliability of each entry with painstaking care. While radar screens suggested a sudden rise in altitude, visual observations described a more level trajectory. Velocity calculations fluctuated, sometimes indicating impossible acceleration or deceleration rates. Each inconsistency prompted internal reviews, as the intercept team questioned whether equipment calibration, operator interpretation, or environmental anomalies were responsible. Declassified transcripts show the deliberate precision with which every measurement was noted, including operator commentary, uncertainty, and contextual conditions. The resulting archive reads as a blend of technical diligence and the persistent presence of something that resisted categorization. Weather charts, geomagnetic reports, and maintenance records were scrutinized exhaustively, each hypothesis dismissed when it failed to account for the full phenomenon. Snow squalls, temperature inversions, auroral activity, and electrical storms were all considered potential explanations. Engineers and meteorologists cross-examined equipment performance under extreme cold, searching for mechanical explanations for the fleeting radar echoes. Each avenue of investigation narrowed possibilities without yielding a conclusion, leaving the tool team with meticulous records but no definitive cause. Analysts emphasized caution, noting that anomalies unexplainable by known natural or mechanical factors should not be dismissed lightly, particularly in a remote and electromagnetically complex environment. Despite growing tension, crew members maintained procedural rigor, documenting observations with meticulous detail while quietly acknowledging the unexplained. The logs capture careful timestamps, repeated sweeps, and interstation communications, illustrating both competence and the creeping awareness that conventional explanations were insufficient. Personnel expressed in private notes the eerie sensation of being observed, or of interacting with an entity that understood the limits of human detection. Even as the Arctic environment pressed its isolation and cold against them, the Thule team continued to operate systematically, producing a detailed archive of one of the most mysterious intercept sequences ever recorded in the early Cold War. Recurrent anomalies persisted through the day, appearing in short, unpredictable intervals, leaving an incomplete but compelling record of events. Sometimes, the echoes disappeared entirely for several minutes, only to return without warning, moving in patterns that did not correspond to flight training, patrols, or commercial air traffic. Every attempt to track or triangulate the source met with frustration, and yet the records grew, precise in measurement but unresolved in meaning. The juxtaposition of extreme environmental challenge, sophisticated instruments, and enigmatic signals created a situation that demanded careful analysis while offering no resolution, heightening the sense of mystery in every entry. Amid the archived materials, these moments offer a window into operational reality, capturing both human observation and the limits of mid-century technology. They show an interplay of expertise, uncertainty, and persistent documentation, revealing the human effort behind data collection and the constraints of instruments in the Arctic theatre. Analysts can trace attempts to reconcile contradictory observations, map anomalous echoes, and maintain coherent communication across the network, all while acknowledging gaps and inconsistencies. These logs stand as both historical records and as evidence of an event that resisted explanation, demonstrating the challenge of separating natural, technical, and potentially unknown elements. Collected reports hint at an intelligence beyond measurement, something that passed through Arctic skies and left only questions behind. The Bisque Bay Escort, NATO Patrol 1954. The Bisque Bay Escort mission of 1954 had begun like any other NATO maritime patrol, aircraft gliding in formation over the storm-tossed waves of the North Atlantic, scanning for Soviet submarines and any unusual traffic. Yet the crew's calm observation log would soon record a phenomenon that defied conventional explanation. A series of disc-shaped objects appearing alongside their formation, moving in synchrony with precision that rivaled the pilots themselves. The transcripts reveal initial uncertainty, as radar blips coincided with visual sightings, and even seasoned airmen struggled to reconcile the mechanical with the inexplicable. As the patrol continued over the Bay of Biscay, the objects maintained a steady wingtip-to-wingtip alignment with the aircraft, a formation no known aircraft of the era could sustain in such turbulent air. Radar operators noted their targets appeared solid, yet emitted no identifiable signal, a ghostly echo that mirrored the crew's own instruments without warning or pattern. Crew logs detail repeated attempts to maneuver, change altitude, and execute standard intercept protocols, only to find the objects matching every motion with unerring accuracy, leaving a growing sense of unease within the cockpit. Observations became increasingly meticulous as the airmen documented speed estimates, relative positions, and altitude changes, attempting to correlate these with radar returns. The logs indicate that the discs performed sudden plunges toward the sea's surface, a descent the pilots described as both unnerving and impossible, given the apparent mass and stability of the objects. Each descent was followed by an immediate rise to the previous altitude, almost as if the objects responded to the aircraft's own adjustments, challenging basic aerodynamic principles and leaving analysts decades later puzzled over the transcript's careful accounts. The crew's radio chatter, preserved in declassified transcripts, captures the shift from professional detachment to disquieted speculation. Pilots referred to the objects using colloquial terms, at first joking, then with an undertone of tension that only grew as the formations repeated. At one point, the lead pilot instructed the navigator to mark the coordinates of the latest manoeuvre, emphasizing accuracy, yet the object's behavior defied any predictable pattern, leaving observers with the unsettling impression that some intelligence beyond human design guided their movements. Midway through the patrol, visual confirmation intensified, and the transcripts reflect attempts at photographic documentation, though images were limited by weather and the technological constraints of mid-1950s aerial cameras. The disk's reflective surfaces caught glints of sun and sea, producing flashes inconsistent with normal aircraft materials. Crew members noted the silence surrounding them, the absence of engine noise, and a complete lack of exhaust, features that distinguish the sightings from conventional aviation encounters, creating a growing sense of cognitive dissonance that is palpable in their contemporaneous notes. As radar technicians cross-referenced the object's signals, they encountered irregularities that modern investigators would describe as impossible for 1950s technology. Echoes with no return signal strength variation, movements inconsistent with flight physics, and sudden accelerations far beyond known aircraft capabilities. The transcripts describe these anomalies matter-of-factly, emphasizing empirical observation rather than conjecture, yet the narrative of the crew conveys the unspoken disbelief that accompanied these factual recordings, a tension between duty and the incomprehensible unfolding before them. The Bisque Bay conditions themselves contributed to the enigmatic nature of the encounter, with dense cloud cover, intermittent fog, and wind shear complicating visual tracking. Pilots reported that objects appeared to vanish into cloud banks only to re-emerge seconds later in precise alignment, behavior inconsistent with conventional optical illusions. These atmospheric factors, noted carefully in the mission logs, underscore the careful documentation by the crew, who recorded environmental conditions alongside every sighting to ensure a meticulous account of phenomena that could not otherwise be explained. Repeated maneuvers to intercept or gain separation from the disks revealed further puzzling characteristics. Crew logs indicate the objects performed synchronized banking and climbing maneuvers, with no apparent propulsion, maintaining perfect formation even during sharp turns. This level of coordination prompted the lead pilot to issue cautionary notes to subordinate aircraft, reflecting both concern for safety and acknowledgement that standard evasive techniques were ineffective. The transcripts reveal a mixture of professional rigour and escalating tension as the patrol persisted over increasingly rough waters. The encounter reached its apex when multiple crew members reported a sudden plunge of one object toward the sea, creating a visual impression of submersion, only for it to ascend moments later without observable interaction with water. Radar confirmed the disappearance and reappearance, reinforcing the crew's sense that they were witnessing a phenomenon unconstrained by conventional physics. The meticulous detailing in the transcripts emphasizes timing, altitude, and vector data, all of which continue to puzzle analysts reviewing the documents decades later, providing a rare window into a verifiable yet unexplained experience. Communication with base command during the patrol remained calm but tense, with reports transmitted in measured terms that belie the disquiet noted in the logs. Instructions were issued to maintain formation and continue observation, while technicians on the ground cross-checked radar anomalies against standard aircraft movement parameters, finding nothing that could account for the disk's behavior. The transcripts reveal a collaborative effort to log the experience with precision, leaving behind records that document both the phenomenon itself and the disciplined yet perplexed human response to it. By the end of the patrol, the objects disappeared from visual and radar detection without warning, leaving the aircrew to reflect on a mission whose official record would later describe only unidentified targets. Notes preserved in declassified transcripts detail every maneuver, sighting, and observation, yet no conclusion was reached, and no explanation could reconcile the data with any known technology of the era. The disciplined narrative of the crew captures a rare intersection of fact and mystery, leaving the true nature of the objects unresolved and haunting even the most skeptical of analysts. Even decades later, the Bisque Bay escort encounter remains a meticulous chronicle of precise observations that refuse to fit any conventional explanation. Electronic Ghosts over Alaska, 1986. a sudden cluster of faint blips appeared across the radar screen, moving with an order that seemed intentional, and the crew immediately sensed that this patrol would defy every protocol they had trained to follow. The aircraft, a standard NATO reconnaissance jet operating in the far reaches of Alaska's interior, maintained its routine sweep across the sparsely monitored airspace, yet nothing in previous experience prepared the pilots for signals that appeared and vanished with unnerving precision. Logs note the immediate attention of radar technicians, who cross-checked frequencies, beam angles, and sweep intervals, confirming that the anomalies were neither instrument error nor environmental artifact. While the radar suggested precise movements, outside the cockpit the sky remained empty, the Alaska twilight revealing only shifting clouds and distant mountain silhouettes. Pilots scanned the horizon repeatedly, binoculars and visual instruments trained on every glimmer, yet the anomalies offered no physical confirmation. Crew transcripts capture exchanges marked by both curiosity and growing tension, as one navigator observed that the patterns did not correspond to any aircraft type known or catalogued. Each crew member documented perceptions alongside instrument readings, carefully noting what could be verified and what remained subjectively perceived in the dim Arctic light. Down at the command centre hundreds of miles away, technicians observed echoes that flickered in impossible patterns, matching the aircraft's position yet never aligning with known flight paths. These remote observations, preserved in declassified reports, indicate that the anomaly was not confined to the cockpit radar alone. Analysts would later remark that the signals behaved in ways inconsistent with conventional aerodynamics, including sudden shifts, stationary pauses mid-air, and a responsiveness to coded transmissions that implied intent. Ground personnel meticulously logged each irregularity, emphasizing the unlikelihood of coincidence or random atmospheric interference. Pilots attempted standard identification codes, sending bursts that should have elicited a response from conventional aircraft, only to record instantaneous reactions from the blips themselves, as though the signals understood the instructions. One transcript entry notes, "We sent the standard IFF pulse, target adjusted heading precisely, no delay." The crew's training dictated procedural consistency, yet these responses were unprecedented. Attempts to alter altitude or velocity likewise provoked immediate, corresponding adjustments, leaving the impression of a deliberate intelligent presence that monitored and responded to their every input without visual manifestation. Auroral arcs danced along the horizon, compass readings fluctuated, and electromagnetic interference peppered the instruments, yet none of these factors could account for the intelligence implied by the radar behaviour. Logs repeatedly referenced the swirling northern lights and geomagnetic anomalies, with technicians noting that standard calibrations remained insufficient to explain sudden signal shifts. Even within this complex natural environment, the crew's precise documentation emphasized that the anomalies were distinct, measurable, and coordinated, standing apart from natural interference that might mimic aircraft activity. Flight logs meticulously recorded altitude, heading, and radar sweeps, following NATO protocols for anomaly observation, and analysts later noted that the crew adhered precisely to the procedure, even while encountering inexplicable phenomena. Each change in bearing, each adjustment in speed, and each attempt to track the blips was recorded with an insistence on precision, creating a permanent record that would later allow declassified review. The transcripts underscore a blend of disciplined observation and subtle psychological tension, as the crew repeatedly confronted signals that obeyed no known rules of aerial behaviour, yet responded intelligently to human action. At moments when the radar was silent, fleeting glimmers of light streaked along the horizon, glimpsed only by certain crew members, leaving others uncertain if the sighting was real or imagined. Reports describe reflections that appeared off low-lying cloud layers or distant snowfields, producing brief, darting flashes that eluded confirmation. Crew logs detail the discrepancy between perception and instrument readings, emphasizing both the intrigue and disorientation caused by partial visual confirmation. This duality reinforced a sense of unpredictability, as some indicators suggested tangible objects while others could plausibly be dismissed as optical anomalies. Data collected from the radar appeared to react selectively to interrogation codes, adjusting timing and position in ways that suggested deliberate, coordinated intelligence rather than random atmospheric effects. Operators noted that every pulse sent toward the blips produced a precise, near-instantaneous change in behaviour, including lateral shifts and repeated alignment patterns that mirrored the aircraft's own movement. Transcripts highlight the careful measurements taken during these interactions, indicating that the crew approached each anomaly as both observers and participants, documenting evidence without yielding to speculation beyond what the instruments and logs could confirm. The pilots maneuvered cautiously, attempting to close the distance or alter course, yet the signals maintained uncanny alignment, leaving the aircrew to consider that they were not merely observing but being observed. Crew comments preserved in declassified documents reflect a combination of professional detachment and subtle unease, as the repeated precision of the anomalies challenged all assumptions about flight dynamics, radar behavior, and atmospheric conditions. The transcripts convey methodical analysis alongside moments of human concern, capturing the tension of witnessing behavior that obeyed rules neither taught nor understood. Corroborating logs from the command center verified the airborne readings, documenting that the anomalous echoes had moved in patterns incompatible with conventional aircraft, reinforcing the mystery with empirical data. Historians and analysts reviewing the declassified material noted that the combination of simultaneous airborne and ground observations provided a rare, verifiable account of a phenomenon interacting with human technology and cognition. This dual verification, however, did not explain, leaving a carefully documented gap between known physics, radar capability, and apparent intelligence. As the patrol concluded, the blips vanished entirely, leaving behind meticulously documented readings, unanswered questions, and a crew who recorded every observation with both precision and a lingering sense of disquiet. The final radar sweeps produced only the familiar Arctic expanse, yet the transcripts preserve the echo of an encounter that resisted interpretation, offering no closure, only persistent ambiguity. Analysts would later describe the logs as exemplary of disciplined observation, meeting inexplicable behavior, capturing a brief moment when human technology intersected with something wholly unclassified but unexplainable. The echoes over Alaska remain locked in the declassified transcripts, hinting at an intelligence that moved unseen yet left traces no human mind has fully decoded. The Ellsworth Approach, South Dakota, 1967. A sudden cluster of rigid hovering lights appeared over the South Dakota runway, their precise formation drawing the crew's attention, as if guiding the bombers along an invisible path. The strategic bomber assigned to this training approach was following standard protocols, descending toward Ellsworth Air Force Base in preparation for landing, yet the presence of the lights immediately disrupted routine. Pilots quickly recorded initial observations, noting that the points of illumination remained stationary relative to the ground while the aircraft advanced, an unusual behavior inconsistent with any known airborne craft. Radar operators began monitoring the signals as the crew described them in clear professional call-outs. With instruments and eyes fixed, the pilots noted the light's subtle, deliberate lateral shifts that betrayed no conventional propulsion, leaving instructors and trainees alike questioning ordinary assumptions of flight. Flight logs preserved the dialogue, capturing repeated attempts to track and understand the light's movement without altering the aircraft's approach path. Observers commented on the mechanical precision of the shifts, describing them as neither random nor chaotic, yet with an unpredictability that created an unsettling sense of anticipation in the cockpit. Crew transcripts indicate that the entire formation of aircraft maintained discipline, carefully logging headings, altitude, and speed as the anomaly persisted. Base radar reflected the same patterns, confirming the light's independent presence, hovering steadily despite the approach of the aircraft, and registering with unusual consistency across multiple systems. The tower recorded their positions as static yet responsive to environmental cues, remaining synchronized along the extended landing corridor. Historical documentation notes that no other aircraft were scheduled in the immediate airspace, and civilian flight data from that evening corroborates the absence of conventional traffic. The combination of visual confirmation and radar tracking left both aircrew and ground personnel with a rare, verifiable observation that resisted standard explanation. Dialogues between instructor and trainee mix procedural commands with mounting concern, each call-out registering how the lights mirrored or anticipated adjustments in speed and heading. Instructors reminded trainees to prioritize safety and maintain approach stability, yet the transcripts reveal subtle astonishment in tone as the light's precision continued unaltered. Every adjustment in throttle, bank, or descent rate appeared to correspond with the light's movements, creating a dual reality in which the crew navigated both the landing protocol and an enigmatic presence they could neither identify nor influence. The evening sky remained clear, visibility unimpeded, and atmospheric conditions did not explain, reinforcing the impression that these lights were controlled by some unknown intelligence rather than natural phenomena. Ground haze was minimal, wind steady, and cloud cover negligible, eliminating common visual distortions that could mimic aircraft or navigational lights. Crew notes emphasized that reflections, mist, or other environmental artifacts were carefully considered and ruled out, underscoring the deliberate and disciplined nature of their observations. Even with full awareness of potential optical illusions, the anomaly resisted conventional interpretation. Observations revealed the lights executing measured pauses and precise shifts along the approach corridor, movements that repeated in consistent intervals with mechanical precision. Pilots and radar technicians both noted the timing of these maneuvers, which suggested coordination across multiple points of light. Transcripts indicate that the crew discussed whether the pattern might reflect training drones or experimental aircraft. Yet no such equipment was authorized or documented in the area that evening. The structured pacing of the lights added a rhythm to the encounter, creating a persistent tension as the bomber continued its descent. Crew members attempted to capture images with onboard cameras, yet limitations in 1967 film technology prevented any definitive photographic record, leaving only detailed written observations preserved in the logs. Descriptions focused on the clarity, shape, and movement of the lights, noting their uniform brightness and apparent lack of heat signature or exhaust. These efforts at documentation highlight both the crew's training in observation and the technological constraints of the period, emphasizing how the anomaly was recorded methodically rather than sensationalized. Every note was cross-referenced with radar data for consistency. Radar operators documented echoes maintaining consistent altitude and spacing, defying expectations of wind or turbulence effects, and presenting readings inconsistent with any known aircraft. The logs detail how the light's behavior did not correspond with speed, vector, or movement limitations typical of 1960s aviation. Each echo was tracked independently, showing pauses and accelerations without corresponding propulsion mechanisms. Analysts reviewing these records decades later note that the combination of radar precision and pilot observation created a rare, verifiable dataset that continues to challenge conventional aviation logic. The instructor's measured voice balanced caution with operational focus, guiding the crew through approach maneuvers while the lights persisted just beyond the intended flight path. Crew transcripts preserve moments of tension as pilots maintained instrument checks, altitude adjustments, and landing sequence integrity, all while monitoring a phenomenon that seemed both deliberate and indifferent to human presence. The logs reflect a mixture of professional discipline and heightened awareness, emphasizing meticulous adherence to procedure even in the face of the unexplained. Control tower personnel and auxiliary radar units independently verified the movements, recording synchronized data that aligned with airborne observations yet revealed no identifiable source. These cross-checks reinforced the anomaly's legitimacy, leaving no ambiguity in the recorded readings. No military or civilian craft accounted for the lights, and no exercises were scheduled in the vicinity that could explain the repeated hovering formations. The corroborated observations lent both factual weight and a deepening sense of mystery to the encounter. As the approach concluded, the lights departed suddenly, leaving behind detailed logs, pilot commentary, and radar readings meticulously recorded, but offering no clarity on the origin or purpose of the persistent formations. Crew members noted the abrupt absence of the lights as unsettling, contrasting sharply with their precise and deliberate movements just moments before. Base personnel reviewed the radar logs, confirming that the anomaly vanished without warning and left a complete record of patterns that would remain unexplained. The phenomenon's sudden disappearance underscored the elusive nature of these structured aerial lights and the meticulous observations that captured them. The lights over Ellsworth linger in the historical record, deliberate and inexplicable, as though they traced a path meant to remain unseen by human eyes. Project Moon Dust Anomaly, Mid-Air Recovery Mission, 1961. Sudden movement in the cloud-streaked sky drew every eye to the descending fragments, which twisted and shifted with trajectories the crew could not predict. The recovery mission had been planned with standard expectations of falling debris, yet these objects behaved with a precision and irregularity that immediately challenged those assumptions. Observers in the cockpit recorded visual positions and attempted to anticipate the path of each fragment, noting differences in descent rate and angular deviation that defied known aerodynamic principles. The first moments of observation set the tone for a mission that would blend careful procedure with unanticipated anomalies. Measurements on the instruments showed angular velocities and unexpected accelerations, prompting the navigator to call out precise coordinates for tracking. Instrument panels lit with sudden spikes in data, confirming that the anomalies were not visual illusions. Crew logs preserved repeated attempts to reconcile the readings with conventional physics, detailing the challenge of predicting movements that appeared partially independent of gravity and atmospheric drag. Each fragment seemed to shift intentionally, sometimes accelerating mid-air or rotating unpredictably, leaving the crew to rely on a combination of intuition and precise calculation to maintain observation. In unison, the pilots adjusted throttles and course, calculating interception angles with practiced precision, while the crew monitored both instruments and the erratic debris. The aircraft executed a series of controlled maneuvers designed to position grappling mechanisms in alignment with the falling fragments. Flight protocols required both steady approach and anticipation of unexpected motion, and the pilot's careful execution was continually tested by the anomaly's seemingly responsive behaviour. Calls and confirmations between the cockpit and the navigator highlighted the tension of balancing safety, procedure, and the elusive pursuit of mid-air recovery. Sunlight glinted intermittently off the fragment's surfaces, making them appear almost to flicker, compelling rapid adjustments to maintain visual contact. Observers noted that the reflective surfaces provided brief clarity amid otherwise indistinct motion, offering moments of orientation to guide grappling efforts. The combination of visual cues and instrument readings demanded constant vigilance, and crew notes indicate repeated corrections to approach angles and altitude, underscoring both the complexity of the operation and the fragment's unusual behaviour. Every shift in position created a new set of calculations for successful recovery. Sensor data revealed movements that refused to follow conventional descent paths, recording echoes that danced across the screens in inexplicable patterns. Analysts later confirmed that the radar returns were consistent with the crew's in-flight observations, yet inconsistent with any known re-entry or ballistic trajectory. The combination of visual, radar, and instrument data provided a verifiable account of the anomalies, yet it also reinforced their unpredictability. Each echo was carefully logged, noting angular deviation, rate of fall, and apparent acceleration, preserving a record that remains unmatched in historical recovery missions. Banking sharply and throttling up, the aircraft followed the fragment's sudden deviations, forcing crew members to reconcile aerodynamic limits with the object's apparent responsiveness. Maneuvers were executed with precision, yet the fragments were frequently adjusted in ways that suggested an active or independent influence over their motion. Cockpit recordings reveal split-second decision-making, each adjustment intended to maintain alignment with the target while preventing structural stress on the aircraft. The interplay of pilot skill and fragment behaviour created a tense, moment-to-moment rhythm that dominated the mission. A quiet tension settled over the cockpit as each crew member tracked unpredictable changes, the combination of speed, reflection, and motion testing both focus and instinct. Notes preserved in declassified logs reveal how the crew alternated between procedural observation and instinctive reaction, documenting not only the movements of the debris but also the human response to phenomena that lacked precedent. Attention to detail remained paramount, as any miscalculation could result in a lost fragment or compromise safety, and every crew member's awareness contributed to the ongoing record of the anomaly. Hooks and grappling lines extended outward, encountering turbulent eddies and sudden shifts, demanding split-second calculations to prevent loss or damage. The technical challenge of recovery, combined with the object's unpredictable behaviour, emphasised the limits of contemporary equipment and aeronautical expertise. Flight logs describe repeated attempts to capture fragments, noting brief moments of alignment followed by sudden divergence. The crew's meticulous execution and the fragment's apparent evasion created a tension that persisted throughout the mid-air operation. blending procedural rigor with unexplainable motion. For an instant, one fragment aligned perfectly with the grappling mechanism, only to veer sharply at the last moment, leaving the crew astonished by its elusive precision. Observers recorded their surprise in real time, the instruments confirming the brief alignment and subsequent deviation. This near capture underscored both the fragment's anomaly and the skill required to respond, highlighting a persistent theme in the logs. The object's behavior seemed coordinated and resistant to predictable forces. Each attempted recovery reinforced the mystery rather than resolving it, leaving the crew to continue pursuit under heightened scrutiny. After the mission, flight logs and radar readouts were compared in painstaking detail, revealing repeated deviations that could not be explained by standard physics or known re-entry dynamics. Analysts and engineers noted patterns that suggested both deliberate motion and responsiveness to the aircraft's proximity, yet without any identifiable propulsion or guidance mechanism. Every piece of recovered data was logged carefully, providing a factual foundation for the event while leaving critical questions unanswered. The combination of empirical records and unexplained behavior established the incident as one of the most puzzling mid-air recovery anomalies documented in Air Force history. By mission's end, recovered fragments told only part of the story, while others disappeared entirely, leaving meticulous documentation and persistent questions behind. Pilots and crew noted the fragment's abrupt departure, either vanishing from sight or moving in ways that made further interception impossible. Logs, radar traces, and crew commentary were all archived in declassified files, capturing the event in technical detail, but offering no resolution. The mid-air encounter remained a testament to the anomaly's elusiveness and to the extraordinary focus of the crew tasked with pursuing it under extreme conditions. Pieces scattered across the ground defied understanding, as if their fleeting, unpredictable paths had been guided by rules beyond human observation or design. The Norfolk Training Flight, Virginia Coast, 1959. Low clouds scudded across the coastline, their shadowed patterns shifting with the wind as the training flight followed its prescribed course along the Virginia coast. Routine maneuvers were underway, designed to reinforce precision handling for the trainee under the watchful eye of the instructor. The sea below reflected the muted sunlight, glinting occasionally through breaks in the cloud cover. Visibility remained variable, and the crew relied heavily on instruments as they navigated the steady pattern. For much of the flight, nothing seemed amiss, and the mission proceeded according to plan, the calm rhythm of training punctuated only by standard cockpit chatter. Cockpit instruments hummed steadily, but subtle deviations in readings drew the attention of both instructor and trainee, prompting careful cross-checks and verbal confirmation. Airspeed and altitude indicators fluctuated in ways that were slight but noticeable, inconsistent with gusts or minor turbulence. The crew paused, confirming headings and throttle settings, and repeated checks revealed no mechanical irregularities. Notes later archived in the declassified transcripts indicate that these early anomalies were the first hints of a persistent presence, something that would soon challenge the ordinary assumptions of the flight and force heightened awareness of the airspace around them. Radar operators verified the flight path, noting that despite a perfectly stable aircraft, something seemed to track every adjustment with unusual precision. Radar sweeps of the training corridor produced echoes that coincided with the aircraft's movements, yet displayed no characteristics of conventional traffic. Crew logs detail repeated sweeps, confirmation of altitudes, and instrument triangulation, each attempt reinforcing the sense that an unseen entity was observing or reacting to the aircraft's operations. These readings, though subtle, were meticulously noted, forming part of the historical record preserved in mid-century Air Force archives. The routine training turns, climbs, and dives proceeded according to protocol, yet each action prompted mirrored movement in the object once it became evident. Small banks and gentle climbs executed by the trainee were precisely reflected by the dark form in the sky. Observers noted how the object adjusted instantaneously to changes in throttle and attitude, a responsiveness that suggested awareness or coordination far beyond normal airborne behavior. Every attempt to alter the flight path introduced tension in the cockpit, as the crew weighed the implications of pursuing standard maneuvers while being shadowed by an entity they could neither identify nor quantify. Tension mounted as the trainee hesitated on minor course corrections, aware that an unseen presence was responding in near-perfect synchronization. the instructor maintained measured commands, balancing instruction with observation, yet logs reveal a growing sense of concern and disbelief. Crew dialogue captured in declassified fragments reflects the mental strain of tracking a flight partner that should not exist, a presence that challenged both training objectives and instinctual expectations. Each maneuver became a test not only of aeronautical skill but of the crew's ability to maintain composure amid unexplained, precise mimicry. Sunlight reflected off the rippling waters below, and drifting haze softened the horizon, contrasting with the uncanny clarity of the object's flight path once it was noticed. Observers recorded minute details. The object maintained steady distance, adjusted for turbulence, and mirrored pitch and roll with consistent accuracy. The juxtaposition of natural atmospheric effects with the anomaly's precise movement amplified unease, creating a sense that the familiar environment was subtly altered by the object's presence. Each observation was logged in careful detail, the juxtaposition of natural and anomalous forming a compelling record of the encounter. Repeated tactical adjustments, sudden climbs, banked turns, and minor dives failed to disrupt the mirroring behavior, forcing the crew to re-evaluate their assumptions about conventional aircraft motion. Maneuvers intended to break formation were anticipated with near-perfect timing, revealing an intelligence or mechanical precision that defied explanation. Pilot notes indicate an increasing urgency in responses, balancing safety with the need to maintain situational awareness. The object's consistency over time suggested deliberate control, heightening both intrigue and tension for the observers tasked with completing the training flight. Airspeed, altitude, and bank angle were logged with meticulous care, revealing no mechanical or navigational cause for the object's precise replication of inputs. Every instrument reading confirmed the aircraft's stability and functionality, while the anomaly continued its synchronized behavior without signal or propulsion trace. Crew transcriptions highlight repeated calculations and verification attempts, all of which failed to produce a conventional explanation. The thorough documentation underscores the verifiable nature of the encounter, establishing a factual record of a phenomenon that remained beyond understanding. Repeated maneuvers increased in intensity, with the crew attempting evasive actions that the object matched with a level of exactness that left them unsettled. Sharp climbs, rolling turns, and rapid throttle adjustments were executed in quick succession, yet the shadowing presence responded without delay or apparent error. Logs indicate that the crew experienced a sustained psychological strain, balancing operational focus with the growing realization that this was no ordinary observation. Each mirrored action reinforced the impression of intent, transforming a routine training exercise into a compelling, unexplained phenomenon. After returning to base, flight logs, radar traces, and radio recordings confirmed that the anomaly's behavior had been consistent and inexplicably precise. Declassified transcripts provide detailed accounts of each maneuver, instrument reading, and observation, all corroborating the crew's testimony. The meticulous records left by both the flight crew and support personnel form a body of evidence that documents the unusual encounter without speculation, preserving it as a factual, unresolved event in Air Force history. Analysts reviewing the data later emphasized the anomaly's precision, noting the absence of known aircraft capable of such coordinated behavior. The object eventually departed the area without warning, leaving only recorded data and a lingering sense of unease in the crew's memory. Pilot notes describe a sudden disappearance that coincided with the cessation of mirrored movement, leaving the flight routine once again normal yet irrevocably altered by the encounter. Radar echoes vanished, instruments returned to expected readings, and the coastal environment remained undisturbed. Yet the documentation ensured that the event would endure as an unexplained record. The crew's reflection emphasized both procedural success in maintaining control and unresolved mystery regarding the presence they had encountered. Its disappearance was as precise as its pursuit, a silent enigma that offered no explanation but suggested intent beyond human comprehension. The Pine Castle Turn, Florida, 1965. The Florida training range stretched beneath them, a patchwork of scrubland, waterways, and range markers, as jets executed precision flight patterns over the controlled airspace. The instructors had laid out a standard series of ground attack maneuvers, designed to simulate low-level strafing and bombing runs in a variety of approaches. At first, The exercise proceeded with routine precision. Throttles were set, control surfaces trimmed, and navigation references checked against the visual markers below. The air was stable, without turbulence or gusts, and instruments all indicated standard performance. For several minutes, nothing suggested that the flight would diverge from its carefully scripted course. Compass needles began to twitch unexpectedly, diverging from expected headings and creating subtle but undeniable inconsistencies between instruments and visual bearings. The instructor noticed the irregularity first, glancing at the heading indicator while confirming the aircraft's position over the designated range. Minor adjustments produced corresponding needle fluctuations, as if the magnetic readings themselves were resisting the controls. The trainee reported slight uncertainty, prompting both pilots to check flight logs and cross-reference visual landmarks, but no error in procedure or environmental interference could account for the sudden deviations. The instructor systematically cross-checked the altimeter, airspeed and heading indicators, confirming the aircraft was performing normally even as magnetic readings remained erratic. Every instrument showed stability, altitude held within specified tolerances, airspeed consistent with throttle settings, and control surfaces responding appropriately. Yet the compass continued to rotate, sometimes slowly, sometimes abruptly, in patterns that bore no connection to wind or maneuvering. Declassified cockpit notes later recorded repeated verification procedures, emphasizing that each anomaly was carefully observed and logged, leaving a factual record without speculation. Reflections off shallow ponds and the shifting shadows of scattered foliage added to the challenge of correlating visual cues with navigational instruments. The Florida range was composed of uneven terrain, interspersed with waterways that reflected sunlight across the cockpit canopy at varying angles. Pilots attempted to reconcile these visual inputs with instrument readings, but the compass anomalies persisted independently of visual interference. Analysts reviewing the archived transcripts later noted how environmental factors were accounted for, reinforcing the mystery of the magnetic disturbances that occurred during the approach to the Pine Castle training corridor. Radio exchanges captured measured concern, with the trainee questioning the reliability of the instruments, while the instructor maintained deliberate, methodical guidance. Crew dialogue, preserved in declassified transcripts, revealed the mounting tension. The trainee's voice was cautious, occasionally hesitant, as if anticipating further irregularities, while the instructor calmly instructed course corrections and verified instrument readings. Every verbal check reinforced the procedural discipline expected of such flights. Yet even as the crew worked systematically, the underlying uncertainty regarding the compass behavior introduced a palpable tension throughout the cockpit. Repeated attempts to recalibrate the compasses yielded no improvement, and crew logs recorded meticulous notes on every anomaly, documenting patterns that resisted conventional explanation. Technicians later corroborated that standard pre-flight calibrations had been followed, confirming that no mechanical error existed. The crew experimented with alternative heading references, including parallel visual cues and magnetic variation corrections, yet the compass continued to spin unpredictably when approaching a specific sector of the range. These records, preserved in the archives, underscore the reliability of the data and the unexplained nature of the phenomenon. From the cockpit, a dark, still form hovered over the range, its position corresponding precisely with the compass's spinning, yet it showed no movement, propulsion, or reflective surface. Observers noted that the object appeared stationary relative to the terrain, yet it exerted a measurable influence on the aircraft's magnetic instruments. No radar signature or visual distortion suggested conventional technology. The anomaly resisted classification. Crew transcripts describe a silent, featureless presence whose proximity directly correlated with the erratic behavior of the navigational systems, leaving both instructor and trainee to navigate under conditions of persistent uncertainty. Approach angles and dive patterns were adjusted cautiously, forcing pilots to rely on visual references and intuition as instrument guidance became unreliable. Standard training protocols were partially suspended, with the crew prioritizing safety and situational awareness over precise course completion. Ground markers, roads, and water channels were used as alternative references to maintain orientation during low-level passes. Each adjustment highlighted the unpredictability of the magnetic disturbance, reinforcing the sense that the anomaly was neither random nor purely environmental, but instead exerted a controlled, localized influence on the aircraft. Gyroscopic readings oscillated in tandem with the object's location, compelling repeated verification and cross-checking against both radar and ground markers. Instrument logs captured synchronized fluctuations across multiple devices, from heading indicators to turn coordinators, emphasizing that the anomaly's effects extended beyond a single compass. Declassified reports note repeated tests conducted mid-flight, all confirming that the aircraft remained fully functional while instruments demonstrated behaviors inconsistent with mechanical failure. These anomalies were documented with care, forming a verifiable record that continues to puzzle analysts decades later. After landing, logs, radar sweeps, and cockpit notes were compiled meticulously, forming a factual record of the anomaly's impact on navigation systems. Investigators reviewed flight data alongside environmental reports and instrumentation standards, noting the lack of an identifiable cause for the magnetic disturbances. Pilot statements emphasized procedural discipline under unexpected conditions, confirming both adherence to training protocols and the unprecedented nature of the event. The combined evidence created a technical verified record that highlighted the anomaly's precise effects without offering explanation or conjecture. Though visible for only a brief interval, the object's influence persisted in the records, leaving no explanation and a lingering sense of unaccounted interference. Analysis of range maps, compass logs, and pilot reports confirmed that the anomalous readings occurred exclusively within the area of the object's location. The event was documented as a singular occurrence in Air Force records, preserving the meticulous details of both instrument behavior and pilot observations. The episode stands as a factual yet unresolved encounter, where navigational certainty gave way to inexplicable interference, and procedural rigor collided with an enigma beyond understanding. Once the craft faded from view, the compass's inexplicable rotations remained etched in the logs, a silent record of a force that no pilot or instrument could fully comprehend. The Kirtland Hover, New Mexico, 1950. The transport aircraft descended steadily over the New Mexico plateau, its shadow stretching across scrub and canyon as the crew followed their standard landing pattern. The wide, open expanse of the desert provided clear visibility, yet the pilots were immediately aware of something unusual lingering in the airspace. Flight logs later captured the initial acknowledgement of the anomaly, though at first it was described in cautious, almost clinical terms, a presence that seemed to share the aircraft's descent without appearing in any known category of aerial craft. The terrain offered a vast, unobstructed view, and the crew's eyes swept across the mesas and scrubland below, searching for any conventional explanation. A massive, indistinct form appeared at the periphery of the pilot's vision, moving in parallel with their descent yet remaining silent and motionless by ordinary measures. It did not emit light or sound, nor did it create any wake in the wind. Even from within the cockpit, its size was imposing. The crew struggled to establish a frame of reference, comparing it to the aircraft itself and to the vast canyon floors below. Declassified transcripts later emphasized the object's sheer scale and the difficulty in judging its distance, reinforcing the sense that the crew faced something physically extraordinary without any clear point of comparison. Conversations in the cockpit became tense but controlled as the crew attempted to gauge the object's distance, size, and trajectory without disrupting standard procedure. The instructor's voice remained steady, calling for verification of speed and altitude, while instructing the trainee to maintain a calm observation. Notes taken during the flight emphasized the precision with which the crew continued to follow their descent path, balancing training discipline against the natural unease caused by the object's presence. Even minor corrections in heading were performed methodically, revealing a crew conscious of both safety and the anomaly. Dust swirled in the wind from the desert floor below, and distant mesas blurred against a shimmering horizon, creating visual distortions that complicated the perception of the hovering presence. Heat currents warped the landscape, producing mirages that might have misled less experienced pilots, yet the anomaly's consistency in pacing the aircraft defied these optical effects. Archival reports mention the crew comparing repeated passes over the same sectors, noting that the object remained in position relative to their descent, unaffected by the distortions in the arid atmosphere. The instructor systematically verified flight instruments and confirmed throttle settings, maintaining operational discipline while noting the object's consistent pacing alongside the aircraft. Altimeter readings, airspeed, and heading indicators all remained within expected parameters, suggesting that the aircraft performed flawlessly even as the unexplained presence mirrored its descent. Crew transcripts highlight careful, repeated cross-checking. Every gauge, switch and lever was scrutinized, reinforcing that the anomaly was not a result of mechanical failure, misreading or procedural error. With each descent and slight course correction, the object matched their movements with an almost deliberate steadiness, neither advancing nor lagging. It maintained an impossible symmetry, a silent companion over the plateau that neither veered nor altered its relative distance. Flight logs describe a palpable tension in the cockpit as the pilots attempted to reconcile the object's apparent size and movement with their own perception of gravity, airspeed and altitude, all while continuing a regulated descent along the expected flight corridor. A quiet unease settled over the crew, tempered by professional focus, as the sheer scale of the object seemed impossible to reconcile with any known aerial technology. Notes in the declassified transcripts capture the mental challenge of observing the form without sensory feedback. No sound, no reflected light, no turbulence. The crew's awareness sharpened, each pilot noting details about relative position, size and alignment. Their attention split between procedural duties and the impossible presence pacing alongside them. Altitude, airspeed and descent angle were carefully logged, revealing that the aircraft maintained a textbook approach, while the unknown presence remained consistently aligned. Every adjustment to maintain a standard glide path was mirrored by the object's movement, yet it remained silent and unilluminated. The detailed records allowed later analysts to confirm the anomaly's behavior with precision. The pacing was deliberate, measurable, and entirely without precedent in documented aerial encounters. Shadows cast across the arid terrain deepened as the object followed its descent, and the wind seemed to carry only normal turbulence, leaving no trace of propulsion or disturbance. Pilots described the impression of mass, of a presence that displaced nothing yet asserted its size, creating a psychological weight that hung over the cockpit. Declassified transcripts convey the juxtaposition of routine flight procedures with an encounter that defied physical explanation, leaving both pilots in a state of careful observation, acutely aware that they were witnessing something outside known aviation parameters. Upon landing, declassified notes and radar checks were reviewed, recording the persistent, unexplained pacing of the object without offering any explanation or corroborating source. The crew's post-flight documentation emphasized strict adherence to standard reporting procedures, noting time, altitude, speed, and visual observations with meticulous precision. Analysts would later review the records, finding no radar echoes, no ground-based interference, and no conventional aircraft capable of matching the object's behavior, reinforcing the singular nature of the encounter. Though the encounter lasted only moments in flight time, its documentation left a detailed account of proximity, scale, and movement that defied interpretation by any conventional metric. The object's silent pacing became the focal point of technical and historical analysis, a benchmark for anomalous aerial encounters in the early Cold War period. Even decades later, the combination of precise logs, pilot testimony, and environmental consistency ensured that the Kirtland hover remained one of the most compelling cases in declassified Air Force records. It had moved alongside them in absolute silence, a presence so immense and deliberate that every descent afterwards seemed measured against a memory no instrument could quantify. Strategic Air Command Night Watch, Montana, 1975. Routine instruments hummed with precision as the aircraft maintained a steady patrol altitude, yet the crew's first logs hinted at unusual activity high above the Montana plains. The night was unusually clear for late summer, with only sparse clouds drifting across the horizon and a pale crescent moon illuminating the rolling terrain below. Even as the pilots followed standard patrol procedures, subtle anomalies began to appear on the aircraft's radar screens, faint blips that seemed to flicker independently of the expected atmospheric interference. While maintaining the flight path prescribed by Strategic Air Command protocols, the crew documented each irregularity, noting time, altitude, and bearing with meticulous care. Points of light appeared intermittently on the radar's edge, their motions subtle but deliberate, prompting repeated visual confirmation from the navigator. Unlike standard radar echoes, these signals persisted across multiple sweeps, maintaining altitude and trajectory without deviation. Crew transcripts emphasize the difficulty in categorizing these phenomena. No known aircraft could match their subtle, non-linear movement. Each observation was checked against other instruments, including altimeters and airspeed indicators, confirming that the anomaly was neither a display error nor an environmental artifact. Crisp radio exchanges relayed measured observations to the base, ensuring operational protocol while carefully avoiding speculation about the light's origin. Brief messages described blips on the radar and intermittent visual cues, all communicated with standard brevity. Base personnel acknowledged the reports, advising the crew to continue their patrol while maintaining vigilance. Declassified logs later note that such exchanges were routine for unusual sightings, reflecting the chain of command's procedural discipline in addressing potential unidentified aerial events. Operators on the ground recorded irregular radar blips that matched the crew's timeline, while security logs noted brief system anomalies coinciding with the sightings. Peripheral monitoring systems occasionally reported minor, temporary disruptions, though core operational functions remained stable. Analysts reviewing these declassified files found the alignment between the crew's reports and ground-based systems to be precise, a convergence of observation and instrumentation rarely documented in the Strategic Air Command's records. High-altitude temperatures fell sharply, and scattered cloud formations occasionally obscured the stars, complicating visual verification of the intermittent lights. Pilots adjusted their scanning routines, alternating between instruments and careful visual sweeps of the night sky. The varying cloud cover and subtle wind shifts created a challenge for depth perception, making the persistence of the anomaly across multiple scans all the more striking. Despite these environmental variables, the lights maintained consistent spacing and movement relative to the aircraft. The pilots systematically scanned instruments, verifying altitudes, headings, and airspeed, while documenting every anomaly with deliberate precision. Each maneuver was recorded in real time, ensuring that logs reflected both environmental and technical observations. Crew transcripts describe a quiet professional tension. The pilots remained focused on standard operational duties, even as they noted a phenomenon that neither conformed to conventional flight patterns nor produced any familiar physical cues. The discipline of documentation became a coping mechanism, allowing the crew to process the unexplained events methodically. Each instance of illumination correlated with minor, unexplained interruptions in communication circuits, suggesting a pattern that blurred the line between observation and interference. Signals briefly faded, then returned without explanation, and these transient disruptions were logged with timestamps corresponding to the radar blips. Pilots and navigators cross-referenced the readings, confirming that the phenomena were neither localized equipment failures nor external interference from other aircraft in the region. The persistence of this pattern deepened the mystery and added weight to the crew's careful observations. Careful entries noted the light's altitude, trajectory, and duration over several minutes, producing a record later corroborated by radar and ground-based instruments. The documentation included exact headings, relative motion, and estimated distances, forming a precise technical record of the event. These repeated observations revealed a subtle, almost imperceptible variation in the light's movement, suggesting controlled or deliberate behavior that did not match any known aviation pattern at the time. Analysts highlighted this as an unusual example of correlated airborne and ground-detected phenomena in the official declassified files. A subtle tension filled the cockpit as the crew processed the implications of lights coinciding with sensitive operational systems, a scenario outside any training they had received. Notes from the navigator reflect an awareness of the potential significance, tempered by adherence to strict procedural guidelines. Pilots continued their patrol in silence, punctuated only by the regular calls confirming headings and altitudes. The combination of human observation and technical anomaly created a layered sense of unease, an implicit acknowledgement that something beyond conventional understanding had intersected with routine military operations. Post-flight reviews confirmed the visual observations, showing that equipment anomalies occurred simultaneously with the lights, yet no known aircraft or natural phenomenon could account for them. Base engineers conducted multiple systems checks, comparing radar sweeps and communication logs against the crew's documentation. All checks confirmed operational stability, reinforcing the anomaly's credibility. The incident was subsequently catalogued as an unresolved event, distinguished by precise documentation and cross-verification between airborne logs and ground systems. This preserved the event as a singular example of unexplained interference within the Strategic Air Command's historical records. At the conclusion of the mission, the lights had faded completely, leaving a trace only in meticulously kept logs and corroborated anomalies that remained unresolved in official records. No additional patrols reported similar occurrences that night, and subsequent evaluations failed to identify any aircraft, drone or natural cause capable of producing the documented effects. Even decades later, the Montana Night Watch remains notable for the rare intersection of human observation and verified technical disruption, preserved as a case study in unexplained aerial phenomena during the Cold War period. The anomaly dissolved into the night as silently as it had arrived, yet every system check afterward bore the echo of an interference no engineer could trace. The Azores Corridor Encounter, Atlantic Transit, 1969. Hours into the Atlantic crossing, the crew maintained a steady course and altitude, unaware that a persistent anomaly would soon shadow their flight for over 200 miles. The early hours were marked by the steady rhythm of engines and the quiet hum of navigation systems, routine sounds that usually dominated such long transits. Yet, amid the monotonous stretch of ocean beneath them, something unusual began to intrude upon their instruments and line of sight. Declassified flight logs later described the initial awareness of a subtle glow appearing on the radar, an object whose presence was first noted in passing, but soon demanded continuous attention. A faint glow emerged on the horizon, steadily brightening as it appeared to mirror the aircraft's every adjustment, prompting repeated checks of binoculars and navigation instruments. The pilots observed its steady alignment with their altitude and heading, an improbable synchronization that resisted any conventional explanation. Crew transcripts emphasized that the light maintained an even pace, neither lagging nor overtaking the aircraft, as if bound to the plane's exact path. Repeated visual verification was paired with methodical logging, documenting distance estimates, bearing and relative movement in detail. The flight logs recorded minute-by-minute bearings, altitudes and speed comparisons, as the crew sought to determine whether the lights were an optical illusion, a distant vessel, or something entirely inexplicable. Instruments confirmed what eyes had already suggested. The anomaly maintained remarkable consistency across readings, yet presented no recognizable radar signature or physical profile. Pilots and navigators coordinated each observation, alternating scans of the horizon and instruments to maintain accuracy. Even minor deviations were carefully annotated, reflecting a disciplined approach to capturing data under circumstances that challenged comprehension. Independent radar sweeps from both the aircraft's primary and secondary systems repeatedly detected the luminous object at consistent altitude and distance, yet no transponder signals or recognizable signatures accompanied it. Flight engineers noted that the radar return did not fluctuate with the atmospheric conditions typical over the North Atlantic, and altimeter readings confirmed the object mirrored the plane's vertical movements with near-perfect precision. Even the autopilot's navigation feedback showed minor, unexplained deviations when tracking alongside the anomaly, compelling the crew to meticulously record every correlation. This unprecedented alignment between human observation and multiple layers of instrumentation reinforced the authenticity of the encounter and heightened the sense that something entirely beyond conventional aviation knowledge was unfolding. Interactions with the control tower continued as expected, yet repeated cross-verifications among the pilots and navigator confirmed that the glowing form maintained an impossible consistency with their trajectory. While no reports from other flights coincided with the sighting, base personnel noted the crew's meticulous documentation and acknowledged the unusual persistence of the object. Declassified transcripts preserve the calm but measured dialogue, illustrating a balance between protocol and the unspoken awareness that the phenomenon lay beyond standard operational expectations. Clouds drifted in scattered formations above the open ocean, occasionally concealing and then revealing the persistent light, while the steady hum of the engines underscored the vast, empty expanse surrounding the aircraft. Night conditions created subtle distortions of depth and scale, and the darkness of the Atlantic made judging distances difficult. Yet, the object's luminous presence, faint but unmistakable, remained discernible despite intermittent concealment, compelling the crew to maintain continuous observation. Logs emphasize the careful distinction between visual interpretation and instrument readings, underscoring the credibility of the sustained sighting. Hours passed, yet the object neither accelerated nor fell behind, holding pace with the plane as though bound by some unseen tether, challenging the crew's understanding of aerial dynamics. Declassified entries record repeated attempts to anticipate its movement, yet the lights maintained a precise, unwavering course relative to the aircraft. Navigators calculated headings and airspeeds, cross-referencing multiple instruments to confirm that no drift occurred. The phenomenon's persistence over such a distance, far from terrestrial reference points, intensified its inexplicability and the crew's cautious fascination. Fatigue crept in during the long observation, but meticulous note-taking and alternating visual scans ensured that no subtle movement or shift went undocumented, revealing a rare combination of curiosity and disciplined vigilance. Crew remarks, recorded in flight logs, describe the effort required to maintain alertness during the extended watch, with occasional reference to the surreal nature of the encounter. Despite exhaustion, the team adhered to procedural standards, maintaining headings, monitoring systems, and confirming instrument readings while tracking the enigmatic form. Secondary instruments, including radar and altimeter cross-checks, reflected the same persistence, reinforcing the notion that the phenomenon was neither a mirage nor an artifact of human perception. Every radar sweep, every minute-by-minute altitude check confirmed the anomaly's presence. Analysts reviewing declassified files highlighted this as a rare case in which crew visual observations and instrument data converged, producing a record that was both methodical and extraordinary. The evidence suggested a phenomenon defying known technological or natural explanations. The prolonged, unbroken presence of the glowing form introduced a quiet, mounting tension as the crew grappled with a surreal, almost unnatural experience sustained over hours of otherwise routine flight. Dialogue entries reveal a subtle undercurrent of unease, tempered by the necessity of maintaining operational discipline. The pilots discussed headings, fuel consumption, and navigation strategies while acknowledging the unexplained consistency of the phenomenon. The simultaneous demands of observation and adherence to mission protocol created a layered tension that pervaded the cabin. Occasionally the object dimmed or disappeared briefly behind clouds, yet it reappeared in precise alignment, resisting any attempt to anticipate its behaviour or path, deepening the sense of the inexplicable. Crew logs emphasise the careful documentation of these intermittent occlusions, noting time, duration and visual characteristics. No pattern emerged that could account for the behaviour, and the repeated alignment with the aircraft's speed and altitude remained without a plausible explanation. Analysts later remarked on the phenomenon's extraordinary persistence, which contrasted sharply with typical sightings or radar anomalies. As the flight drew to a close, the glowing form receded into the distance, leaving only meticulously logged observations and corroborated flight data to attest to its extraordinary endurance and alignment with the aircraft. Crew debriefings and subsequent review confirmed the consistency of the logs, leaving the encounter as one of the most rigorously documented, unexplained aerial phenomena in Atlantic transit records. No follow-up sighting occurred, and all standard operational checks returned normal readings, leaving the event preserved solely through the crew's careful documentation. After hundreds of miles and countless observations, the glowing form simply faded into the horizon, leaving only precise flight logs as testimony to its unyielding persistence. Final transmission over the Pacific, classified recon flight 1968. Electronic monitors flickered unexpectedly, drawing the crew's attention to an unidentifiable signal that seemed to hover independently of known aircraft patterns. At first, the readings appeared to be minor anomalies, easily dismissed as interference or equipment error, but successive sweeps revealed consistency across multiple instruments. The pilots exchanged measured glances, each aware that their mission, classified reconnaissance over the Pacific, demanded precision and composure, yet the object's presence forced a careful reconsideration of standard procedures. Flight engineers meticulously recorded each blip, comparing altimeter, radar and navigational data, noting that the anomaly maintained altitude and course in ways that defied routine interpretation. Shadows and light danced across the horizon in irregular angular shapes, defying immediate classification despite repeated visual confirmation from multiple crew members. Even through cockpit glass treated for glare and distortion, the forms seemed to shift and fold, rotating at angles that did not align with conventional aerodynamics. Observers took careful note, sketching approximate outlines in logbooks and attempting to reconcile perception with optical limitations, aware that the object's movements were too deliberate to be atmospheric or marine reflections. The crew's discipline prevented panic, but a quiet tension settled in as the anomaly persisted, lingering at a distance that allowed both careful observation and growing unease. Repeated sweeps of the radar and navigational instruments showed subtle, unexplained correlations with the object's position, prompting careful documentation and discussion among the engineers. Each system independently registered faint but consistent returns, yet none of the transponders or known aircraft codes matched the readings. The co-pilot monitored the secondary radar, cross-referencing with visual bearings, and noted the uncanny alignment of every indicator with the anomaly's unpredictable movement. Engineers debated potential technical errors while methodically confirming instrument calibration, aware that even a minor misreading could distort their interpretation of an event that already skirted the boundaries of comprehension. Low clouds scattered across the night sky created intermittent veils of obscurity, leaving glimpses of the phenomenon both fleeting and unnervingly consistent. Moonlight reflected off the ocean in scattered shafts, occasionally illuminating the object with stark clarity, only to be obscured again by drifting layers of cloud. The shifting light patterns complicated the crew's attempts at precise observation, yet every appearance seemed to reinforce the data recorded by radar and navigation systems. Even in moments of partial concealment, the anomaly's behaviour remained deliberate, drawing scrutiny and prompting careful notation in the flight logs. Comments recorded in the transcripts reveal careful phrasing, measured tones, and growing acknowledgement that the anomaly resisted any conventional explanation. "It's holding formation with us, but without engines," one pilot murmured, followed by a quiet exchange concerning speed and vector adjustments. The crew avoided conjecture, instead prioritizing precise observation, but the transcripts reveal subtle undertones of bewilderment. Engineers occasionally verified instrument readings aloud, noting minor deviations or strange alignments, while the pilots attempted to maintain operational protocol. The dialogue reflects both professionalism and the creeping awareness that the phenomenon could not be reconciled with standard aerospace experience. Efforts to transmit the observation to command were repeatedly distorted, forcing the crew to rely solely on their immediate instruments and direct visual assessments. Every message was fragmented, partially received, or delayed, creating a disjointed exchange that amplified the tension in the cockpit. Attempts to clarify position and altitude with base control produced static-laced responses, prompting the crew to log data independently and focus on observation over communication. The anomaly's persistent presence and the lack of clear verification from command created a sense of isolation, as though the aircraft had entered a portion of the Pacific where conventional signals and procedures no longer applied. Compass variations and micro-adjustments in autopilot readings coincided with the shape's movements, suggesting an influence beyond normal electromagnetic phenomena. The flight engineer noted that each subtle deviation occurred only in moments when the object was within visual range, a pattern impossible to attribute to standard navigation error. Pilots checked bearings and manually recalibrated systems, yet the minor anomalies persisted. Over repeated sequences, the crew became increasingly aware of the correlation, carefully documenting it while maintaining mission discipline. The instruments suggested an interaction between the aircraft and the phenomenon, though its nature remained entirely unknown. A quiet strain settled over the crew as they maintained operational discipline while reconciling the impossible sight with their professional training and expectations. Fatigue, the monotony of long hours over open water, and the surreal quality of the event combined to create subtle tension, even as each member continued precise observation. Notes in the logs reflect careful descriptions of movements, distances, and angles, recorded with exactitude. Despite the eerie calm of the cabin, an unspoken recognition of the anomaly's inexplicability bound the team together in a shared focus, as each person balanced professionalism with the creeping uncertainty of witnessing something beyond conventional understanding. The form appeared to fold in on itself, rotating through impossible angles, a motion recorded in the flight logs as both precise and utterly unexplainable. Crew members watched silently as the object's geometry defied spatial expectations, changing in ways that did not correspond to any familiar physical model. The pilots adjusted headings, and radar operators tracked corresponding blips, yet the phenomenon's behaviour remained unmatched by any known aerial or marine dynamics. Notes emphasise its consistency, yet impossibility, suggesting that the anomaly adhered to some pattern or intelligence beyond human conception, documented in meticulous detail despite its defiance of explanation. Every available sensor was monitored as the anomaly persisted, the team logging minute-by-minute observations, while maintaining readiness for any required procedural response. Engineers verified system functionality continuously, confirming that readings were accurate and not instrument artifacts. Pilots maintained a steady course, balancing maneuvers with ongoing observation, while the object's persistence created a layered tension in the cockpit. Each crew member's detailed notes reflected both adherence to protocol and the intellectual struggle to categorize an encounter that remained unclassifiable, highlighting the interplay between operational procedure and the unexplainable nature of the event. The final entry captures calm acknowledgement and confusion in equal measure before all transmissions ceased, leaving only fragmentary data as evidence. Logs reflect the last measured observations, followed by incomplete phrases and truncated sentences that end abruptly. No further signals were received from the aircraft, and no corroborating reports were documented by ground or naval systems at the time. The encounter concluded with silence, leaving investigators and future analysts to rely solely on declassified fragments, piecing together the event from cryptic notations, partial recordings, and meticulously documented observations preserved in official archives. Silence settled across the Pacific, and the recorded anomaly remained forever unresolved, an enigma locked in the classified archives.